Chapter 205. The war is over. I can give you 30% of the loot. Sulen pointed at the weapons and equipment he just picked up from the battlefield. Sir Sulen, we don't need these things. Mission shook her head. Sulen looked at Mission in confusion. You don't want them? Then what do you want? Food? Sir Sulen. Mission hesitated and said, We, the Centaur tribe, want to join the northern city. Ding! The recruitment order is in effect. Sulen heard the system notification. Hearing that the Centaur tribe wanted to join the northern city, Sulen was overjoyed. With more than 3,000 centaurs joining, the northern city's military strength would double. More importantly, these centaurs were the best archers and heavy cavalry. The northern city's lack of cavalry would be made up in an instant. Join the northern city? Sulen held back his excitement and continued to ask, Now that the orc tribe has been destroyed, you can go back to where you were before. Why do you want to join the northern city? Your Excellency Suren, you should also know that the weak are prey to the strong in the wilderness. Our centaur tribe used to have legendary masters, but since my father was killed by the orcs for covering our escape, the centaur tribe no longer has a legendary master. In this wasteland, without the protection of a legendary figure, even the strongest tribe is just an ice fortress. Once the weather warms up, everything will vanish. You are now the only legendary figure in this wasteland. Our centaur tribe can't take any more trouble, so we want to join the northern city and get your protection. Mission looked at Sulen and said seriously. Mission, I can protect the centaur tribe, but the centaur tribe must be loyal. Sulen pondered for a moment. Although he had already agreed to it in his heart, he still had to put on a good show. Otherwise, if he agreed immediately, wouldn't it seem that he, a legend, was too cheap? Of course, we swear to the gods that we will be loyal to North Town and Sulen, Mission said seriously. Mihian, Northern Town welcomes everyone who is willing to be loyal to him, Sulen said with a smile. Mission looked at Sulen in surprise. His big eyes sparkled beautifully. Suddenly, the filly opened her arms and hugged Sulen. Then she whispered in his ear, Thank you. Sulen suddenly felt warmth on his face. Then, the little mare let go of her hands and ran away with a smile. Sulen wiped his face. The little mare was quite big. With a chuckle, Sulen began to patrol the campsite in a good mood. I have a little mare that I want to ride every day. If I don't ride her for a day, I'll feel anxious. The North Town city had gained a lot from this battle. Most importantly, the 3,000 centaurs had joined the North Town city. They could recruit around 1,000 centaurs, and they would become the North Town city's mobile troop. Sulen would give the rest of the centaurs a pasture. The centaurs were a nomadic tribe. They wouldn't be used to living in the city, and it would waste their talents. These centaurs were the best herders. Sulen planned to let them breed horses, cows, sheep, and other livestock. The best horses would be the military horses of Northern Town. The rest would be used as goods to trade with the human kingdoms. Cows were raised for animal labor, and sheep were raised for meat and fur. With the addition of the centaurs, Northern Town's livestock breeding would be greatly improved. Apart from the centaur tribe, the spoils of war weren't plentiful. Apart from some simple and crude supplies, there were only beastmen's weapons and equipment. However, most of the beastmen's equipment were leather armor. There were only a few pieces of iron armor, and the quality was also poor. It was too heavy and didn't have enough defense. Naturally, Sulen wasn't satisfied with this kind of armor. So, they were sent back to the forge. As for the beastmen's weapons, due to their limited skills and strong bodies, they used heavy weapons. Most of them were two-handed axes or spiked maces. They were all brought back to the forge. Sulen planned to modify the leather armor into metal scale armor. Although it wasn't as good as metal armor, it was still something good in the wilderness. The beast men left behind a lot of weapons. They were all sent back to the forge in northern town. They would be busy for the next few months. It took a day to clean up the battlefield. It also took a day to burn and bury the corpses. It wasn't until the third day that the northern town's army returned with their spoils. After the victory, Sulan had already sent people back to report. Now that the northern town's army had returned, the northern town held a grand welcoming ceremony. Sulan rode at the front of the army. Behind him were Chris, Hathaway, Karina, and the little mare Mission. Boulder and Johnson led the barbarians and followed closely behind. As soon as they entered the city, beautiful magic fireworks bloomed in the sky. A large number of flowers fell from the sky. A beautiful half-elf girl rushed up and put a wreath on Sulan's head. There were even more half-elf musicians playing music. The whole city was in a sea of joy. Sulan came to the central square amidst the cheers. The square was filled with soldiers and civilians. Sulan announced that the celebration would last for 3 days. After burying the ashes of the fallen soldiers in the martyrs' cemetery, Sulan returned to the Lord's castle. He didn't go to the celebration outside. The refugees and slaves usually worked hard all year round, so the celebration was a chance for them to relax. Sulan wanted to have a good rest. The celebration lasted for 3 days. The northern town became a sea of joy. After 3 days, everyone went back to work. The northern town city began to accept refugees again. Since almost 4,000 centaurs had joined, the population of the northern town city had reached 13,000. However, this also brought a hidden danger. The number of humans was too small. The barbarians, half-elves, drows, and centaurs had almost 5,000 people in total. Although the human population was 8,000, they were still weak compared to these races. The current situation in the northern town city was the result of Sulan's personal strength and charisma. Therefore, in order to eliminate the hidden danger, the northern town city increased the number of immigrants. The defeated orcs in the wilderness had already spread the news of the northern town's power. In the wilderness, no other tribe dared to challenge the northern town. In addition to increasing the number of immigrants, Sulan began to recruit soldiers again. This time, Sulan was going to recruit 2,000 spearmen. The spearmen who had survived several battles were going to be the basic officers. Because Sulan had read the training records, his ability to train soldiers had skyrocketed. The speed at which the army was formed had greatly increased. In order to form the formation breaker camp as soon as possible, Sulan needed a large number of spearmen. After announcing the expansion of the army, Sulan called the 4 soldiers who had already reached the level of spear guard. He planned to let these soldiers try to advance into the formation breaker camp. Unexpectedly, among the 4 spear imperial guards, only 1 was human. The other 3 were the war spirits that he had summoned before. Among these war spirits, there were still more than a dozen archers. There were less than 10 spearmen. In order to advance into the formation breaker camp, they had to go through a cruel test. Sulan built a training ground outside the northern town according to the test requirements of the formation breaker camp. The soldiers who wanted to advance into the formation breaker camp had to undergo training there. After the training, they would go to the final step. The formation breaker camp was limited to 700 people. This was because there were only 700 light balls in the Tiger Tally. These light balls looked very similar to the self-created general model Sulan had before. However, they were much smaller than the self-created general model. They should be similar items. However, the self-created general model was the complete version. This one was indeed a watered-down version. After the training, if the spear guard successfully merged with the light ball, then he would advance into the formation breaker camp. Of course, if the merging failed, it would not affect him. It could only be said that he was not suitable to become the formation breaker camp. Because there were only 700 light balls, there were only 700 people in the formation breaker camp. Every time a soldier of the formation breaker camp died, the light ball on his body would automatically return to the tiger tally. Then, a new soldier of the formation breaker camp would be selected. After letting the 4 spear guards train here, Su Len led the architects of the northern town to begin an environmental survey. He was already preparing to build the Arc de Triomphe. Su Len planned to build the Arc de Triomphe in front of the central town square, on the Avenue of the Rising Sun. From the gate of the northern town square, along the Avenue of the Rising Sun, all the way to the central town square, and then to the city lord's mansion and the harvest altar. All of them were on this central axis. The Arc de Triomphe Su Len planned to build was a classic 3-arched building. The whole body was carved with pure white marble. The major battles that Su Len had experienced would be carved on it. Su Len had already drawn the rough design of the Arc de Triomphe. Of course, the real blueprint still needed to be supplemented by the master architects. The final blueprint would only be officially built after Su Len approved it. The entire Arc de Triomphe needed a few hundred tons of marble to build. Fortunately, there were more than a dozen camel beasts in the territory. These large and powerful camel beasts could carry several tons of stone at a time. If they relied only on manpower, just transporting the marble from the Sierra de Lotus would be a big problem. In order to mine the marble, Su Len specially allocated a group of 500 kobold miners. Then, he arranged for 2 groups of soldiers to go to the Sierra de Lotus to mine the marble. The construction of the northern town square was also in progress. Because of the growth of the population, 70% of the land outside the town was used for planting sugar beets and potatoes. The rest of the land was used for planting barley, oats, and other brewing materials. Some of the land was used for planting spices. Buying spices from the caravans was too expensive. Su Len planned to grow some spices. Not only could he use them himself, but he could also make money. However, Su Len felt that it was a pity that there were too few types of spices suitable for growing in the north. P.S. The following does not count. Thanks to Big Apple, Big Orange, Master Pooh, Long Jyoti, Speaking Loneliness to Loneliness, Iron Blood Ho, Chow 534, Kitten Loves Fishing H, Big Devil V, Spicy Peppermint, Let Him, Fragrant Lemon Tea, There's Actually a Master, Goodbye to You, Master of the Heavenly Court, Mysterious Mr. X, A Share of Sunshine, Meng Xintian, and other book friends tips. Thank you to 133,955 for your 2,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to Rotsen for your 2,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to Don't Be a Moralist, thank you to Warm Wine, Desert Bandits for your 1,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to 20200831205259011 for your 1,334 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to 160710192111128 for your 2,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to Tomorrow Night Doesn't Accept Books, Noaing, White Cloud Leisure. Thank you to 2017010092002641356 for your 500 Chidian coins tip. Floating Dream thanks. Chapter 206. After confirming the location and shape of the Arc de Triomphe, the construction of the Arc de Triomphe began. Other than checking on the progress every day, Su Len went to the training grounds of the formation breaker outside the city. After a week of training, the spear guards were ready to try to fuse with the ball of light of the formation breaker. The 4 spear guards were sitting cross-legged in a quiet room. Su Len took out the ball of light from the tiger tally and chose to fuse with it. After the fusion began, the virtual images of the 4 spear guards appeared in front of his eyes. There was a progress bar above their heads, showing that they were in the process of fusion. Looking at the progress bar, it would take at least an hour for the fusion to complete. Su Len took out a bottle of rum and poured a cup. He drank as he waited for the fusion result. The fusion process did not go well. 10 minutes after it started, one of the spear guard's virtual images showed that the fusion had failed. The ball of light left the guard's body and returned to the tiger tally. Although Su Luan was prepared for this, he was still upset that one of the guards had been eliminated in less than 10 minutes. The fusion continued. The remaining 3 spear guards all lasted for half an hour. Then, 2 of them also showed that the fusion had failed not long after. In the end, only 1 spear guard successfully fused with the ball of light of the formation breaker and became a soldier of the formation breaker. Formation breaker, the number of people at the front is 1700. After a cruel selection from the elite spear guards, they successfully become soldiers of the formation breaker. They have a stronger body and attack power. The determination to break through the enemy lines, death without life. The soldiers of the formation breaker had many talents, including strength, tenacity, iron bones, agility and other basic talents. There was also an additional talent of the formation breaker, formation breaker. Formation breaker, the determination to break through the enemy lines, death without life. The soldiers of the formation breaker are not affected by morale. Defense increased by 50%, attack increased by 20%. Additional effect, fight to the death. Fight to the death. As long as the commander does not give the order to surrender, the formation breaker will fight to the last soldier. After activating the fight to the death, the soldiers of the formation breaker will have their attack power increased and their defense lowered. After successfully advancing to the formation breaker, Su Luan still needed to give them new equipment. According to the requirements of the system, all soldiers of the formation breaker needed to be equipped with full body armor. Their weapons were either spears or swords. They also needed to be equipped with a shield. At the same time, all soldiers of the formation breaker were equipped with crossbows. It could be said that the soldiers of the formation breaker were much better than the soldiers before. Right now there was only 1 captured barracks soldier, and the equipment was easy to deal with. However, once the number of capture barracks increased, these equipment would become a huge expense. Fortunately, the growth of the capture barracks was slow and Su Luan had enough time to prepare. After successfully advancing to the formation breaker, Su Luan appointed the soldier of the formation breaker as the commander of the spearmen, and the other spear imperial guards as the deputy commanders. Su Luan planned to expand the number of spearmen to 3,000. In fact, according to the standards of the Kingdom of Florence, it wasn't difficult to pull up tens of thousands of spearmen. The Kingdom of Florence only needed to send out a spear and train it to become a spearman. The spearmen in Northern Town could be called elites after going through strict training. Florence's spearmen were basically cannon fodder. The North Town city did not have that many people to expend, so the army of the North Town city had no choice but to recruit elite soldiers. After successfully advancing to the formation breaker, Su Luan came out of the town alone. He still had a reinforcement order in his hand that had not been used. Su Luan was going to wait until the formation breaker finished training before using it. Last time when he used the reinforcement order, he had a guess in his heart. This was why he waited until now. Coming out of Northern Town City, Su Luan found an open environment and then took out the reinforcement order to use it. A light flashed, and the reinforcement order disappeared. Then a system prompt sounded in his ear. Ding! The host has used the reinforcement order, a group of soldiers is about to arrive. A space door opened, and then a group of soldiers came out of the space door. The effect was the same as last time when he used the reinforcement order. This time, what appeared in front of him was also a war spirit wearing armor and holding weapons. What made Su Luan even more ecstatic was that in addition to the 2 groups of 40 spearmen and archers, there was also a soldier wearing heavy armor, holding a spear and a shield, with a crossbow and a long sword at his waist. Compared to the soldiers around him, this soldier was clearly stronger by more than 1 level. Formation breaker. This time we really made a big profit. Su Luan said excitedly. Last time when he used the reinforcement order, Su Luan only recruited spearmen and archers. At that time, he had the spearman commander seal and the archer commander seal that he had obtained later. At that time, he had already guessed. Now that he had obtained the commander seal of the Formation Breaker, he had successfully recruited the Formation Breaker. After using the reinforcement order, he really had recruited a soldier of the Formation Breaker. After these otherworldly spirits all came out of the space door, they directly lined up. The leading soldier of the Formation Breaker took a step forward. "General, the Spearman Squad and Archer Squad have all arrived." Sulan, who already knew the details of these soldiers, nodded, and then brought these soldiers back to Northern Town City. Because of the addition of the centaurs, Sulan had specially set aside an area in Northern Town City for them to live in. At the same time, Sulan had already prepared to build a town 50 li east of Northern Town City. This area had flat terrain and lush water plants. It was very suitable for grazing. Building a city here was specially for the centaurs to graze and live in. The centaur tribe used to live by water plants, but after joining Northern Town City, these centaurs would become semi-nomadic. After the annual harvest in Northern Town City, the leftover stems and leaves would be mixed with some grain and husks to be used as fodder for breeding. The centaur tribe would use the city that they were going to build as the center to carry out nomadic breeding. This semi-nomadic and semi-residential breeding method could raise more livestock, and it could also reduce the mortality rate of the livestock in winter. In the past, the centaur tribe would have large amounts of livestock die every winter because of the cold and lack of food. After changing their nomadic lifestyle, they would graze by water plants during the summer and return to the city after the winter was covered by ice and snow. In the city, there would be a large number of houses with good thermal insulation. At the same time, there would be a large amount of green fodder stored. In this way, not only would the livestock not die, they would even gain weight. Northern Town City was undergoing construction every day, and the soldiers were undergoing strict training. With such a large amount of exercise, they would have to eat some meat every day. It could be said that Northern Town City's food consumption was very high. The previously stored jerky and salted fish had almost been used up. Now that the centaurs had joined, Northern Town City's meat supply would no longer be tight. After the centaurs were supplied with meat, they would also receive large amounts of other living materials. After the centaurs joined Northern Town City, Sulan clearly understood their living standards. They could only make some crude ironware, and their cloth was also inferior sackcloth. When worn, they would prick the skin. They only had salt for seasoning, and food was also very scarce. Even tea leaves were only sold by Fiery Bird in recent years. As for tea leaves, the centaurs were very fond of them. The centaurs, who ate meat all year round, needed tea leaves to relieve grease and aid digestion. Although they now had Northern Town City to provide food, their fondness for tea leaves had never changed. The climate in the north wasn't suitable for tea leaves to grow. The tea leaves of Cult City were also sold from the south. In this era, the nobles liked to add milk and honey to their tea leaves. Now that they had Northern Town City's white sugar, they added white sugar to make tea that was very similar to the milk tea Sulan drank in his previous world. However, it tasted better than the milk tea in his previous world. At least the milk here was very pure. After the centaurs joined Northern Town City, Sulan placed a large number of orders for tea leaves. The price of tea leaves in the Florentine Kingdom was considered cheap, but in the northern wastelands, the price would increase by at least 50%. If they were sold to the centaur tribe from before, the price would be doubled. Even so, Northern Town City had to fork out a sum of money to buy tea leaves every month. After the centaurs joined Northern Town City, their quality of life improved by 2 or 3 levels. They didn't have to wear those prickly sackcloth, they didn't have to sleep in the open every day, tea leaves were no longer a luxury, and their food was much more sumptuous. When the centaurs first joined Northern Town City, their loyalty was between 65 and 70. After a week, the centaurs' loyalty had reached 75. Many centaurs' loyalty had even exceeded 80. At their peak, the centaur tribe had close to 10,000 people. After a great battle, they had less than 4,000. Many of the centaurs had died. Now, most of the centaurs were women and children. There were less than 1,000 adult males. Sullen's original plan was to recruit 1,000 centaurs to form a heavy cavalry team and a light cavalry team. This way, all the centaurs' youths would be recruited. Of course, Sulen couldn't do that. After considering the centaur's situation, he changed the recruitment to 400. 200 heavy cavalry and 200 light cavalry. Sulen planned to equip the centaurs with full sets of armor. It wasn't the normal armor from before. It was the heavy armor from the Florentine Kingdom's Red Dragon heavy cavalry. 200 sets of heavy armor for the centaurs were not cheap. Each set of armor weighed close to 200 kilograms. 200 sets of armor would cost at least 40,000 kilograms of iron. However, the heavy cavalry's destructive power was shocking. Their charging ability was much stronger than human heavy cavalry. Of course, the centaurs would probably only be ranked in the top 5 when it came to the heavy cavalry with the strongest charging ability. The ground dragon heavy cavalry would be ranked first. Those were the true steel tanks. The ground dragon heavy cavalry was a type of semi-dragon. No other heavy cavalry could compare to the ground dragon heavy cavalry in terms of weight and charging ability. Not to mention, some ground dragons even inherited dragon breath. However, the number of earth dragon heavy cavalry was very small. There were less than 200 of them, but no one dared to underestimate them. Chapter 207. Other than the Drakes, there were also some countries that had formed their own mammoth cavalry. The mammoth cavalry was 4 to 5 meters tall and weighed a dozen tons. They were unstoppable when they charged. There was also the petrifying lizard cavalry formed by the drows. These petrifying lizards were almost as big as the Drakes. They also had the ability to petrify. These petrifying lizard cavalry were no less troublesome than the Drakes. Of course, this didn't mean that the centaur heavy cavalry was weak. On the contrary, the centaur heavy cavalry was quite strong. Although the centaur heavy cavalry was powerful, there were many factors that restricted them. The most important factor was that the number of centaur heavy cavalry was too small. The centaurs were different. As long as the northern citadel continued to develop, Sulen could easily form a centaur cavalry of a few thousand centaurs. After the centaurs joined the northern citadel, Sulen realized that the centaurs had a lot more ways to evolve. The first was the centaur herdsman, then the centaur recruit, then the centaur ranger, then the centaur elite archer, and finally the centaur marksman. The other advancement path was the centaur guard, the centaur heavy cavalry, and finally the centaur trampler. The appearance of these long-range and close-range cavalry instantly made up for Northern Town City's weakness. From now on, Northern Town City could rely on spearmen and longbowmen to fight head-on, while the centaur archers could circle around the flanks. The centaur heavy cavalry would be able to watch out for any openings in the enemy's defenses. Once they appeared, they would launch a surprise attack to break through the enemy's formation. It would be the deciding factor on the battlefield. Sullen's archers were equipped with iron scale armor with a chain mail inside. They weighed around 30 pounds, which was just right for the centaurs. They were equipped with a scimitar and a centaur longbow. The scimitar was a melee weapon that they used to chase after enemies or when enemies got close to them. Furthermore, they were equipped with iron scale armor and chain mail. These centaurs could also be used as heavy cavalry to charge into a formation. Of course, they would charge into a regular infantry formation. North Town City had captured more than 2,000 beastmen, gnolls, earth goblins, and earth goblins. The earth goblins, and gnolls were sent to the quarries and mines. Sulen planned to sell the beastmen slaves to the human world since they were quite strong. One had to know that this world advocated force. Basically, there would be buildings such as the Colosseum in every city. Every day, gladiator performances would be held there. However, ordinary gladiator performances could no longer arouse the interest of the audience. Therefore, many gladiator arenas would carry out more thrilling fights. For example, they could hunt some ferocious beasts and give the gladiators some broken weapons so that they could fight those beasts to the death. Or they could capture some other races, such as orcs, trolls, ogres, and other races, and let the gladiators fight with these races. And so on. These cruel and bloody performances are very popular among humans. There were more than 1,000 beastmen captives. If they were allowed to work in the territory, they would be greatly affected if the beastmen rebelled. Therefore, to reduce the pressure, Sulen planned to sell the beastmen captives as slaves. A strong beastman slave could be sold for at least 5 kinnar, and a beastman warrior was even more expensive. Of course, if these beastman slaves could be transported to the southern provinces, the profits would be even higher. Sulen had already divided these beastman slaves into many groups. He couldn't sell them in large quantities. Once someone found out, the price of the beastman slaves would naturally drop. This was something Sulen didn't want to see. Therefore, he planned to sell them in batches. There was no humanity in the gladiator arenas. For those who pursued sensory stimulation, the most bloody and violent performances were especially popular. Cruel battles between beastmen and humans were very popular. Of course, this kind of gladiator show would consume a lot of beastman slaves. The beastman slaves Sulen sold each time would be used up very quickly. After 2 or 3 times, all the beastmen would be sold out. The northern town city kept moving people from other lords' territories. The large number of people coming in slightly relieved the northern town city's manpower shortage. The foundation of the northern town city's Arc of Triumph was finally completed. The Arc of Triumph was made entirely of marble. Sulen specially transferred thousands of people from other places to build it. The construction of the Arc of Triumph was very slow, mainly because of the large number of carvings on the marble. There were a total of 8 carvings of Sulen commanding victories on the Arc of Triumph. For these carvings, Sulen could only endure the slow construction. On the Arc of Triumph, the names of the soldiers who died in each war and the generals who made contributions would be engraved. This was also the honor of the northern town city soldiers. The Arc of Triumph was designed to be 23 meters tall, 44 meters wide, and 22 meters thick. It was a 3-arched building. The Arc of Triumph was built in the Gothic style. There were also some carved angels on the pillars of the arches as decorations. On the left and right sides of the arches, there were also carvings of the soldiers of the northern town city. There were barbarian warriors, elite spearmen, half-elf longbowmen, drow warriors, centaurs, and so on. At the top of the Arc of Triumph, there was also a statue of Sulen riding on a horse. The Arc of Triumph was a very large project. If there wasn't enough manpower, it would be impossible to build it without a year or 2. During the construction, Sulen specially used the stone-to-mud spell to merge the cracks on the Arc of Triumph so that it looked like a whole. After the beastmen were defeated, the northern town city became the most powerful force in the surrounding wastelands. Sulen's work also became a lot easier. Now, other than the fixed daily training and inspection, his favorite thing was the various delicacies created by the halfling Frodo. Frodo even used some dragon meat and other ingredients from the Lord's castle's warehouse to make magic dishes. Hathaway secretly supported him. Otherwise, why would Frodo take things out of the warehouse? Of course, Sulen had to admit that Frodo's magic dishes tasted very good. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people coming after hearing about Frodo's new magic dishes. Johnson, isn't it your turn to patrol the mine today? Why are you here? Sulen asked Johnson, who was arm wrestling with Boulder. Boss, I'm done with my patrol. Johnson hurriedly said. Just when he was distracted, Boulder suddenly exerted force and gained the upper hand. Although Johnson reacted quickly, he lost the initiative. Their strength was about the same, so he lost in the end. I won. You have to give me half of your share today, Boulder said excitedly. Harris, what's wrong with your head? Harrison sat at the bottom of the table with an impatient expression. That restless look on his face was nothing like that of a sheriff. It was a waste of his serious face. Ugh. Harris rubbed his head and carefully avoided the big bump. Today, I helped Floor to collect honey from the Circus Peak, and a mountain bear took a fancy to me. Although I managed to drive the mountain bear away, I was also stung by the Circus Peak several times. Sulen couldn't help but shake his head. Another greedy guy. At the same time, he was also interested in Frodo's feast today. Apart from them, Chris, Hathaway, Karina, Grace, and the Little Mare mission were all here. Is everyone here? Frodo the halfling walked out in a white chef's outfit. The outfit was a little big, and it looked a little funny with Frodo's body. After looking around, Frodo said, "Then, let's officially start the product tasting." Then, Frodo pushed a dining cart in. All the food in the cart was covered with lids. When the food was placed on the table, everyone stared at the delicious food. In the middle was a large piece of pterosaur tenderloin. The pterosaur tenderloin was coated with a layer of honey, and it looked very tempting. Other than the pterosaur tenderloin, there were all kinds of desserts, drinks, and staple foods. A strange aroma filled the air. Not only Sullen's Adam's apple moved, but the others also looked like they were hungry. Frodo the halfling was in high spirits, as if he had entered his home turf. He only shouted after all the food was served. "Let's dig in." Sulen picked up the table knife and cut a piece of the honey tenderloin. After Suluan finished the first cut, the rest of the people took action at once. Both sides were fighting for more. Sullen's eyes twitched. This was the performance of his heroes. This kind of secret barbecue. Suluan opened his mouth and took a bite. The barbecued tenderloin had a wonderful change as soon as it entered his mouth. Suluan felt a faint ice crystal erupting in his mouth, and his whole taste buds felt cold. This was the natural characteristic of the ice Quetzalcoatlus meat. After Frodo's cooking, he could clearly feel the texture of the Quetzalcoatlus tenderloin and all kinds of magical and delicious spices. The secret pork tenderloin tasted very good. Everyone was chewing it. Suluan felt the wonderful cold feeling in the barbecue meat. The tenderloin meat was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, with a variety of spices. The honey juice drink made with purple crystal honey and ice cream tasted very good. The Little Mare, Mission, no longer cared about her image. She took a box of ice cream and ate it. The Little Mare loved all kinds of sweets. There was also a pterosaur tenderloin next to her. Her beautiful face was red, and there was a lot of oil stains on the corner of her mouth. Hathaway controlled the wizard's hand and cut the pterosaur tenderloin into small pieces. She then enjoyed it slowly. Karina and Grace had completely lost their usual demeanor and image. Eden was also hiding in a corner and eating heartily. Sulen lay comfortably on the sofa. The energy in his body slowly merged with his body. Chapter 208. Sullen's body felt warm. These magic dishes made with pterosaur meat and some precious magic ingredients were not only delicious, but also had some special effects. However, because Sullen's physical fitness was too strong, these magic dishes could not strengthen his body again. Although they could not increase his physical fitness, they could let his body recover quickly for a period of time and temporarily increase his magic resistance. Although these magic dishes did not have much effect on Sulen, they were still very effective on others. Hathaway had the best effect. These magic dishes were very effective on people with low physical fitness. As their physical fitness increased, the effect would gradually decrease. This time, the main ingredient was Cryopterus meat. It increased Sullen's ice resistance and doubled his physical recovery speed. The ones who ate the most were the two gluttons, Boulder and Johnson. However, magic dishes were not something that could be eaten casually. After seeing these two guys eating until their faces were red and their foreheads were covered in sweat, their whole bodies were like cooked prawns. "Sir Sulan, these two can't eat anymore." The halfling Frodo looked at the two and quickly reminded, "If they eat too much, their bodies won't be able to bear it." Sulan stepped forward and directly knocked out the two gluttons who were still fighting over the food. Then, he threw them to the other barbarian guards and asked them to send the two guys back. This time, the food made by Frodo was very sufficient. Although the group of people ate and drank, they still did not finish eating. However, everyone was almost full, especially the few female spellcasters. They had small appetites to begin with. "Don't waste the rest. Pack it up and take it back." Sulan looked at the people who were full and said. Although the food was not made by him, the ingredients were provided by him. After hearing Sulan's words, the originally lazy people immediately became energetic and began to discuss the distribution of the food. Even Grace, who was always calm, did not give in. She argued until her face was red. However, they soon agreed on the distribution plan. Chris and Hathaway got the most food. The rest of them did not have much difference. Frodo was now the chief gourmet consultant of the northern town. Of course, this was recognized by Sulan. Every month, Sulan would give him some money and various magic ingredients for experiments. At the same time, he would also teach him a few new dishes. This former adventurer had been completely led astray by Sulan. Although Sulan was not a chef in his previous life, as a veteran of the foodie nation, he knew how to eat even if he did not know how to cook. In his previous life, there were 8 major cuisines and other minor cuisines. Although he did not remember all of them, he still knew dozens and hundreds of them. After distributing the food, Sulan left with Chris and Hathaway. After eating a magic dish, it was necessary to exercise. Sulan had eaten a lot, so he felt a little hot. Of course, this was a normal reaction. He was going to take Chris and Hathaway for an after-meal exercise. With a fast recovery buff, Hathaway and Chris were no match for him. However, they also had their own unique skills. For example, Hathaway's use of grease was absolutely superb. The feeling could only be described in one sentence: indulge in the smoothness of silk. As a succubus, Chris's physical fitness was much higher than Hathaway's. Her coordination was also very good. All kinds of rope skills and postures were perfect. Sulan felt that she was better. However, she was still no match for Sulan. In the end, it was Angela and Anna who came to the rescue. It was a quiet night. Since there were no other threats in the wasteland, Sulan began to prepare to build new cities around his territory. According to the current immigration rate, the city would have 50,000 people in a year at most. Other than the refugees from Florence, the city had also accepted a barbarian tribe. As the new ruler of the wasteland, Northern Town City was not as violent as the orcs. There were many barbarians living in Northern Town City, and the nearby barbarian tribes knew about it. On top of that, the living conditions in Northern Town City were quite attractive to the barbarians. The reason why the barbarians did not submit was because they knew the rise of the city would alert the other 2 large tribes in the wasteland. There would be a great battle when the time came. No one had high hopes for the city back then. No one had expected the situation to suddenly change. No one had expected the orcs to be defeated by the city after defeating the Centaur tribe. Then, the remnants of the Centaur tribe directly joined the Northern Citadel. The Northern Citadel became the only overlord in the wilderness. The other tribes naturally knew what to do. However, these tribes weren't as important as those who had fought alongside the Northern Citadel, so Sulan didn't treat them well. In other words, if they wanted better treatment, they had to contribute to the city. It was the foundation of the city. After the first barbarian tribe submitted and was accepted, the other barbarian tribes were also moved. There were not many large tribes in the wasteland, but there were countless small tribes with 100 or 200 people. These small tribes were always in a precarious situation. Who knew when they would be destroyed or swallowed by other tribes? In addition to other tribes, there were also some powerful magical beasts in the wilderness, such as the ice Quetzalcoatlus killed by Su Luan. If they were targeted by them, those small tribes would have no power to resist. The number of barbarians in the city had greatly increased after the barbarians submitted. Although these barbarian tribes only had 100 or 200 people, they were still a lot. Soon, the number of barbarians in the city had exceeded 1,000, and the growth did not slow down at all. Su Len ordered the army to start recruiting barbarians. He was going to use them to form a heavy infantry. Although the barbarians had the disadvantage of being uncontrollable after going berserk, they were still very useful for attacking. The Kingdom of Florence did not want to use the barbarians because of the high cost and high casualty rate. They were expensive consumables. However, the barbarians in the city were not consumables. The existence of the system had increased the barbarians' leveling up speed. They only needed to level up a few times, and they would be able to suppress most armies. If they were equipped with armor and weapons, their casualty rate would be very low. The city could afford it. "Chris, how much money do we have left in the treasury? How many resources do we have?" Su Len asked after signing an order. "Kinnar has 30,000. We have 110,000 units of food. It is enough for us to eat for a year. We also have 80,000 pounds of iron ingots." After hearing Chris' report, Su Len said, "Take half of the money and resources. I am going to build a small city in each of the 4 directions of the city." "Master, we have a limited number of slaves. It will be very slow to build 4 cities at once." Chris reminded him. "I know. Let's build the cities in the south and east first. The city in the east is for the centaurs. They will send some people. Then, we will go to the wilderness and capture some slaves. We will send some more people over. They need to raise livestock. It doesn't matter if the infrastructure is not good. The housing and livestock pens must be good." Su Len said with a smile. "Let's move the refugees from the northern provinces to the city in the south next month. At the same time, send out a 500-man army and some slaves to build the city. We will try to build the houses and walls before winter comes. Also, send the newly formed army out for actual combat training. At the same time, capture the slaves." Chris recorded Su Luan's request and assigned it to others to carry out later. "Master, if we capture slaves on a large scale, we will run out of food quickly," Chris said worriedly after doing some calculations. "Don't worry about that. In a month and a half at most, the food in the city will be ripe again. I can't guarantee meat, but we will have enough potatoes. The slaves will be lucky if they have something to eat. Compared to their lives before, I think I am too kind. Come to think of it, what did the kobolds, gnomes, and other monsters in the wasteland eat? Wild vegetables, insects, plant roots, other animals, and other goblins. They were always hungry and hungry." Working for Northern Town City was tiring, but at least they had enough to eat, and no one would kill them for no reason. The construction of the new town quickly began. All kinds of money, resources, and manpower began to be transferred. The first to move were the centaurs. They were looking forward to the construction of the new town. At least with the protection of the city walls, they would have more time to react if they were ambushed again. The construction of the city in the south also started. The new city was about 50 miles south of the city. It was not too far away. If they were ambushed, they could hold on until the city's army came to their rescue. There were 500 soldiers stationed here. Once the city expanded, the size of the army would increase accordingly. After the new city was built, the 3 cities would form a triangle. The area within the triangle would be controlled by the city. Humans used this method to expand their territory when they were exploring the wilderness. The 500-man army escorted 3,000 refugees and even more slaves and resources to the new city in the south. Su Len personally led the team. The new city was built next to a lake. The lake was huge. Su Len took a quick look and found it was a few times bigger than the city. There were plenty of aquatic products in the lake, and the land was fertile. Su Len quickly decided to build the new city next to the lake. Chapter 209. The new city was located on a slope on the north bank of the lake. The view was broad, the land was fertile, and there were water veins underground. On the east side was a forest, which was very suitable for building a new city. The water of the lake was as clear and smooth as a mirror. The blue sky and the scenery on the shore were all reflected in it. The scenery was very beautiful. Su Luen named the lake Mirror Lake, and the newly built city was also called Mirror Lake City. Su Len planned Mirror Lake City to be 1 kilometer long, with a population of around 10,000. If the population increased in the future, the city would continue to expand. However, there was no need for such a big city right now. More than 3,000 refugees and even more slaves began to work. First, they built a temporary camp here. The camp used wood and mud to build fences. When the fences were finished, Su Len would cast mud to stone on them. The camp would not be dismantled after the city was built. It would be used as a military base. Northern Battlefront City was very experienced in building a city. After confirming the location of the city, the slaves began to clear the stones and weeds in the area. Some of the higher areas had to be leveled, and the lower areas had to be filled with soil. They also cleared the weeds and trees in the area. Mirror Lake was not small. It was roughly circular, with a diameter of about 3 kilometers. There were many fish living in it. After confirming the safety of the area, the dock and fishing boats would be built immediately. Then, they would arrange for fishermen to fish and provide food for the territory. The next morning, the sun was not yet up, and the lake was very humid. There was a thin layer of fog in the morning. Although it was almost summer, the early morning in the wilderness was still a bit chilly. The birds that woke up early chirped and began to look for food. There were a few drops of dew on the grass. Su Len washed his face with the cool lake water, dispelling the hazy sleepiness. He had gotten used to the soft velvet bed in the castle and the smooth skin of the half-elven maids. He did not sleep well last night. It was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but it was difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. Breakfast was bacon and stewed potatoes. Although he did not bring the maids, he still brought the chef. The chef's skills had improved a lot under Frodo's tutelage. Although Frodo often complained that these people were as stupid as swine beasts, they were actually very good at cooking. The bacon was beef, mixed with onions, wild vegetables, and mushrooms that were commonly found in the wilderness. The fragrant meat broth emitted an alluring aroma that could awaken one's digestive system. This was the most common method of cooking in Northern Town City. After all, there were so many potatoes here. Su Len took a piece of black bread and heated it up. Then, he tore it into small pieces and threw them into the broth. The fragrant and delicious broth softened the originally dry and hard black bread. After swallowing the soft bread and the hot broth together, a warm feeling enveloped his body. His stomach, which was rumbling with hunger, also felt satisfied. The soft stewed beef was paired with some vegetables, and the taste was not bad. The potatoes were soft and glutinous. With a gentle press of the tongue, it mixed with the fragrant meat broth and was swallowed into the stomach. Black bread was not bad. In fact, it depended on the materials used to make it. Back in Kalen City, most merchants sold black bread with a lot of bran, pebbles, and even wood shavings, so the price was very low. It only cost 2 coppers. This kind of bread was a little soft when fresh out of the oven, but it could be used as a weapon after cooling down. The black bread made in Northern Town City was not like this. There were no wood shavings, pebbles, or other random things in it. The good thing about black bread was that it was easy to store. Northern Town City made a lot of black bread to use as dry rations. After breakfast, Sulen led the soldiers of Northern Town City to patrol around Mirror Lake. The morning breeze blew away the mist, and the soft sunlight shone down. A thin layer of mist surrounded Mirror Lake in the early morning. It was like silk, faintly discernible, reflecting the surrounding scenery. It was like a fairyland. Sulen left 400 soldiers to protect the camp. He personally led 100 people to explore the surrounding environment. Sulen was not familiar with Mirror Lake, but with such an abundant water source, there must be many tribes living nearby. In addition to these tribes, Sulen also wanted to make sure there were no powerful magic beasts living nearby. He needed to clear out the dangers around Mirror Lake City in advance. Not long after, a faint sour smell floated in the air. It smelled like excrement or green bubbling sewage. Sulen frowned. He was very familiar with this smell. Many goblins, kobolds, and gnolls had this smell in their territories. Soon, the scouts at the front came back with news. "Sir, the scouts have reported that they found a kobold tribe of over 1,000 people in the eastern forest," a soldier hurried over to report. "Over 1,000 people. Mirror Lake City just happens to be short on manpower. Bring some people with me to capture these kobolds," Sulen said directly. Half of the 100 soldiers he brought with him were new recruits. Even so, new recruits were enough to deal with monsters like the kobolds. Sulen brought the scouts closer to the kobold tribe. The kobold tribe was located in the forest. These kobolds had gathered a lot of wood and mixed it with mud and hay to build some low shacks. There were pits in the shacks. These half-underground shacks had better insulation. The pits were where they lived. There was some hay and dried branches inside. Some even had a few pieces of dirty fur or black cloth. There were 2 or 3 kobolds in each shack. Sulen frowned as he endured the suffocating smell. Every time he came to the natives' camp, Sulen felt like he was being attacked by a biological weapon. Northern Battlefront City was very experienced in dealing with kobolds. First, the longbowmen would fire 2 rounds of arrows. Then, the barbarians in heavy armor would charge and break through the kobolds' defense line. Then, the spearmen would form a formation and attack. If they were defeated in 1 round, then they would chase and capture slaves. If they were not defeated, then they would attack again. When a large group of people approached, no matter how well they hid, they would still make a lot of noise. At the very least, the birds and insects would alert them. Some kobolds had already noticed the commotion around them. Then, many kobolds picked up their weapons and prepared for battle. "Sir, should we make a move?" A captain came to Sulen's side and asked in a low voice. "Go. Take care of it quickly." After the order was given, the northern battlefront city's army began their attack. First, there were 2 waves of arrows. Then, the barbarians charged, followed by the spearmen. The kobold camp, which did not even have a wall, was in chaos. The barbarians charged into the kobold tribe like a gust of wind. The spearmen behind them quickly formed a formation and formed 2 groups of spears. They began to push forward. The soldiers of northern Battlefront City were a lot stronger than these kobolds. After training in the military camp, they had mastered all kinds of military skills and fighting techniques. After being strengthened by the system, even the new recruits were quite strong. As long as they went on the battlefield a few times and killed some kobolds, goblins, and gnolls, they would quickly level up. Among all the classes in Northern Town, the human spearmen gave the lowest experience points. The other classes, such as archers, barbarian warriors, centaur knights, half-elf longbowmen, and drow warriors, had more experience points than him. Of course, their overall stats were also the lowest. Of course, for the army, besides personal strength, discipline was more important. Pure bravery and violence were not popular in the army. This was also why the barbarians in northern Battlefront City always formed their own teams. When the barbarians fought, all their formations would be messed up. Although the barbarians were strong, if Su Len really had to choose, he would choose the weaker spear guard. Moreover, the spear guard could also advance into the formation breaker. The formation breaker's strength was no weaker than the barbarian berserkers. Compared to the berserkers, they were more disciplined. After the 700 formation breaker soldiers formed a formation, even if the barbarian berserkers had twice the number of soldiers, they could still win. Over the years, the Kingdom of Florence had fought against the barbarians, orcs, and gnolls in the north. They did not rely on individual bravery. In battles with less than 1,000 people, the Kingdom of Florence lost more than they won. However, when the number of barbarians reached tens of thousands, the result was basically a huge victory for the humans. The kobolds who had not fully woken up from their dreams were attacked by a rain of arrows. Before they could react, the barbarians rushed up like a meat grinder. The kobolds who had just climbed out of their shacks were immediately slaughtered mercilessly. The charging barbarians and the iron armor on their bodies weighed more than 300 pounds. Coupled with the impact, some kobolds were directly knocked away like ragdolls. Many kobolds' chests were directly broken. Even more kobolds were chopped in half by giant axes. After seeing the northern Battlefront City soldiers slaughtering the kobolds like vegetables, the kobolds quickly fled in panic. The soldiers of the northern Battlefront City began to capture slaves. After the battle, the number of kobolds who died was at most over 100. Half of the remaining kobolds escaped, and the rest were all captured. In the next 2 days, Su Len led the soldiers of the northern Battlefront City to sweep the area around Mirror Lake. In the end, they captured more than 3,000 slaves and came here to reclaim the land. In addition to the slaves from the northern Battlefront City and the refugees, there were now more than 10,000 people gathered in Mirror Lake City. The construction of Mirror Lake City began with the city walls. Because there was a lack of stone around Mirror Lake City, they used rammed earth walls. After the brick kiln factory was built, they would wrap the rammed earth walls with a layer of bricks. Mirror Lake City was close to Mirror Lake, so there was an abundance of water. The surrounding land was fertile and very suitable for farming. In the future, large amounts of farmland would be cultivated here. No matter which era it was, food was very important. The construction of Mirror Lake City would take a long time, so Su Len would stay here for a long time. Chapter 210. Northern Garrison City was already very familiar with how to enslave kobolds and goblins. They would select some kobold supervisors and goblin supervisors from these slaves and give them slightly better treatment. These people with vested interests would then help Northern Garrison City oppress the other slaves. Tens of thousands of people worked together on the construction site, and the progress of the project was quite good. Mirror Lake City's walls were built using rammed earth, and the height was only 6 meters. The higher the rammed earth walls were built, the larger the layer of earth below. The amount of work required to build a 10-meter-high wall was more than double that of a 6-meter-high wall. A 6-meter-high wall could already block the vast majority of wasteland monsters. The remaining 6-meter-high walls wouldn't be able to block them. Even if you built a 10-meter-high wall, it still wouldn't be able to block them. Therefore, they built a 6-meter-high wall. Speaking of which, the difficulty of building a rammed earth wall wasn't low. The foundation of the wall was made of rock, and Su Len directly used the mud to rock spell to turn the rammed earth foundation into rock. The amount of work required to build a 4-kilometer-long wall foundation wasn't small. Fortunately, it wasn't built in one go. The rammed earth used for the wall wasn't casually dug up. The excavated earth needed to be filtered first, and the stones and other debris inside were picked out before the earth was steamed. This was done to kill the grass seeds, insect eggs, and other things inside. After that, the steamed earth was used to tamp the earth layer by layer. Although the wall made this way couldn't compare to rock, it was still very hard. In Sullen's previous life, he read a historical record about ancient city building. In it, there was a city called Tongwan City. In order to build this city, the walls were built using glutinous rice juice, white silt, sand, and slaked lime mixed with a certain proportion of cooked earth. Moreover, what made people's scalp numb was the strictness of the construction supervisor. During the inspection, the soldiers were to use iron awls to pierce the wall. If they could pierce an inch into the wall, then they would kill the worker who built the wall and fill the wall with their corpses. If they couldn't pierce the wall, then they would kill the soldier. This city became a famous city at that time. Even in his previous life, 1,000 years later, more than half of the ruins of Tongwan City were still preserved. Of course, this sturdy city did not protect the dynasty. 9 years after Tongwan City was completed, it was attacked and occupied by other countries. Mirror Lake City's rammed earth walls were naturally not that extravagant. Sulan did not have a large amount of glutinous rice to build a city, but they did transport a batch of lime from northern town city. Then, they mixed the lime and steamed earth according to a certain ratio to build the city. While Mirror Lake City was being built, the soldiers weren't idle either. Although Mirror Lake City had been cleaned up, there were still tribes from the surrounding areas that were migrating there. This way, not only could these soldiers be used for training, they could also continue to provide slaves for Mirror Lake City. Sulan didn't go there again except for a few days ago when he took the soldiers to wipe out a few tribes. This level of battle was too easy, and there was no challenge at all. Sulan just left it to the soldiers to deal with. Then he asked the craftsman to make a boat for him and went fishing on Mirror Lake. However, his leisurely life was soon disrupted. "You said that a pack of wolves attacked the slaves of Mirror Lake City?" Sulan handed 2 fish to the guard beside him. "Yes, sir, and it's not the first time." The drow nodded and continued, "At first, we thought it was a few wild wolves or other beasts that attacked the slaves when they were alone, but there have been continuous attacks in the past few days." "Did you find the wolves or beasts that attacked?" Sulan frowned and asked. "Sir, we have sent all the scouts to look for them, but there is no news yet." "Send some of the scouts from northern town city over and expand the search area. I don't believe that those beasts will suddenly appear and disappear." Sulan said with a cold gaze. "Yes, sir." At the same time, send some more soldiers to the construction site of Mirror Lake City. Tell the workers and slaves not to act alone. If you find anything unusual, report it immediately. Under Sullen's order, Northern Town City quickly sent a group of scouts, led by Aiden. With more scouts, the investigation area was expanded again. However, as soon as the order was given, Mirror Lake City was attacked again. This time, the attack was more serious than any of the previous ones. Not only did some slaves and workers lose their lives, even the soldiers that Sulan sent to protect Mirror Lake City were injured. 4 spearmen from northern town city died from the attacks of the beasts. Moreover, the continuous deaths had seriously affected the construction of Mirror Lake City. The situation was very serious. Northern Town City's soldiers had cleared out so many tribes in Mirror Lake City without any deaths, but they were killed by some beasts. Sullen's face was as cold as ice. At first, Sulan thought it was just some normal beasts attacking, but now, even 4 of Northern Town City's soldiers had died. After Northern Town City defeated the orcs, there were still people or other species that dared to attack Northern Town City in this wasteland. They were challenging Northern Town City's bottom line. Sulan was ready to give these people the harshest blow. The construction of Mirror Lake City couldn't be stopped, so Sulan sent some barbarian warriors and heavy armored spearmen to guard the city. These barbarian warriors and heavy armored spearmen were much stronger than normal soldiers. With these soldiers guarding the city, the attacks finally stopped. The attacking beasts seemed to have sensed the strength of these barbarian warriors, so they didn't continue their sneak attack. The barbarian great axe berserkers who had reached the 3rd grade were very powerful. These barbarian warriors who had grown up through cruel and bloody battles were all elites among elites. Although they liked to go berserk and not listen to commands, they still had a strong sense of danger. With the danger sense, talent, although the barbarians would charge every time they went berserk, in reality, there weren't many attacks that could really damage them. On one hand, he sent out barbarian warriors to guard the city. On the other hand, he sent more scouts to investigate the surroundings. Construction site of Mirror Lake City. The workers started to get busy again. The fastest part of the city wall was already 3 meters tall. Large amounts of slaves brought up the soil that had been mixed and then tamped it down bit by bit. A small official in charge of the construction of this part of the city wall hurried over. "My lord." The person in charge of the construction of the city wall, who was around 30 years old, came over and bowed. Sulen didn't stop. He waved his hand and signaled for them to get up. "Where is the location of the attack?" "Take me there." "Please follow me," the official said respectfully. Near the construction site of the city wall, there was a wooden house. The group quickly walked over. This should be the place where the manager and soldiers rested. Soon, the group arrived at the small room. The bodies of the 4 spearmen were placed to the side. Sulen's face was cold. He walked forward and lifted the white cloth on the bodies, revealing the hideous corpses underneath. The corpses were still intact, but the wounds were hideous. There was a large hole in the iron scale armor, and the neck was badly mutilated. Sharp claws and teeth, like to sneak attack. After looking at the corpses for a while, Sulen said in a deep voice, "Although the iron scale armor's defense is not as good as iron armor, the beast must be very strong to be able to damage it to this extent. Ordinary beasts don't have such strength, and these soldiers didn't even fight back. Obviously, they are very good at disguising and sneak attacks, and they are very fast." The 4 soldiers died suddenly in a short period of time. It's very likely that there was more than one attacker. It seems that we have some magic beasts here. Sulen wasn't too worried about magic beasts. Although they were very powerful and had magic, and were very dangerous, as long as they could be killed, the rewards were also very high. The meat of magic beasts had some magical effects, and the fur of magic beasts was very valuable. There were also some other things. In short, magic beasts could be said to be full of treasures. Many times, humans would organize people to hunt magic beasts. This industry was much more dangerous than being a mercenary. There were many magic beasts in this world. Some magic beasts were bred from generation to generation, and some magic beasts were the result of mutation of ordinary beasts. After mutation, the beasts might become larger in size, or they might have some ability to control elements, or both. Sulen wasn't worried about magic beasts. As long as they dared to appear in front of him, he was confident that he could kill them. As a legendary figure, he had this confidence. After eating a simple meal, Sulen sent out more scouts to investigate. He himself stayed at the construction site and waited quietly. Soon, the scouts brought back some new news. Some wolves were found in the forest northeast of Mirror Lake, but they were just ordinary beasts. Soon, night fell, and all the workers and slaves began to return to the camp. Some of the slaves couldn't live in the camp, so they could only live behind the walls of Mirror Lake City. In the past, they used to take turns to work at night, but after the attack, they stopped working at night. With the presence of the barbarian warriors, the attackers didn't appear. They obviously had a high command, and it wouldn't be easy to catch them. If the barbarian warriors kept guarding here, it was very likely that they wouldn't appear. Sulen didn't want to keep the barbarian warriors here. So he planned to let the barbarian warriors go back, and he would stay here and wait for the attackers to appear. After letting the barbarian warriors leave, Su Len hid behind the city wall and closed his eyes to sleep. Time passed, and the attackers didn't appear. Su Len didn't rest. With his current physical condition, he wouldn't have a problem even if he didn't sleep for a few days. The night grew darker, and the night wind blew, bringing with it a whining sound. Some of the bonfires in the camp were gradually extinguished. It was close to 2 in the morning. This was the time when people were the most sleepy, and also when their defenses were the most lax. Just then, Su Luen, whose eyes had been closed, suddenly opened his eyes. A flash of lightning flashed across his eyes. Chapter 211. Finally. Su Len sneered. Ah! A few screams suddenly sounded in the silent night sky. A lightning flashed, and Su Len had already rushed up. The hard ground was directly cracked. After arriving at the scene in an instant, Su Len saw a few ice-blue shadows moving quickly. In the blink of an eye, they pounced on Su Len. Their sharp claws flashed with cold light as they grabbed at Sullen's neck. The chill made Sullen's skin tighten. He exerted force on his feet, and his body that was originally rushing forward suddenly stopped. The lightning on the purple dragon halberd in his hand surged, and a dazzling lightning was drawn in the darkest time before dawn. Bang! The lightning exploded, and the several ice-blue shadows that had rushed towards Su Luen were sent flying backwards at a faster speed than before. The shadows rolled on the ground and stood up again. At this time, Su Len finally saw the appearance of these attackers. These attackers were tall and very similar to wolves, but their fur was ice blue. They were at least 1.5 meters tall at the shoulder and more than 2.4 meters long. Their claws and teeth were sharp, and there were some ice crystals that appeared when they breathed. Winter wolves. Sullen's eyes flashed. He had already recognized these giant wolves. These were the magic creatures that lived in the northern wasteland, the winter wolves. They were also the most dangerous of all the wolf creatures. Not only were they big, but they could also use ice spells. They were immune to ice spells, but fire spells would cause double damage to them. Winter wolves usually formed a pack of 5 to 6 wolves. Sometimes, they would also act together. More importantly, winter wolves were very intelligent, on par with ordinary humans. They also knew the common language and the language of giants. At the same time, they could communicate with ordinary wolves, wargs, and even domestic dogs. They could be said to be very cunning and difficult to deal with. Adventurers who came to the northern wastelands had also fallen into the traps of the winter wolves. These cunning winter wolves, who knew the common language, would even shout, "Help," to attract humans. Often, careless adventurers would fall into their traps. Of course, although winter wolves were dangerous, their fur was very popular. Ordinary winter wolf fur was sold for 2,000 kinnar. Winter wolf fur could be made into cloaks, boots, robes, and other magic items that could resist cold. Some of the fur with beautiful colors could be sold for a higher price. Only your own fur was more expensive. The most popular ones were dragon penis and dragon skin. Dragon penis would be crazily fought over as soon as it appeared, and dragon skin could be made into light leather armor. In reality, wyvern eggs weren't very popular among adventurers. Wyverns had a low chance of hatching, and they were difficult to tame after hatching. In addition, feeding a wyvern cost a lot of money. Hence, only a few great lords and countries would breed wyverns. The 5 winter wolves in front of him stared at Su Luen with their blue eyes. The attack just now made them hesitate, but Su Luen did not give them time to think. He moved and rushed toward one of the winter wolves. Since the attackers were winter wolves, Su Len would not let them go. Seeing Su Len rushing over, the winter wolf wanted to dodge, but it was too late. It could only open its mouth and use frost breath on Su Len. The other winter wolves saw Sullen's attack and did not hesitate to attack Su Len. Although the winter wolves were strong, they were only level 3 magical beasts. How could they be a match for Sulen? The frost breath only caused some frost to appear on Sulen's body. In the blink of an eye, he recovered without even frostbite. The lightning wrapped around the purple dragon halberd exploded in an instant. The surrounding 3 meters was covered in lightning. The paralysis effect of a single lightning bolt was limited. The Constitution had a high chance of immunity, but with a large amount of lightning gathered, the paralysis rate rose sharply. The winter wolves were paralyzed as soon as they pounced. Sulen's purple dragon halberd swept across, and the 5 winter wolves were beaten back again. At the same time, they were all wrapped in lightning and could not move for a moment. Sulen shook lightly, and the layer of frost on his body shattered and disappeared. With his current resistance, the 5 frost breaths did not cause much damage. The winter wolf's frost breath was far less powerful than Cryopterus. Taking advantage of the fact that the winter wolves could not move, Sulen's purple dragon halberd quickly slashed across their throats. Scarlet blood gushed out, and the 5 winter wolves quickly lost all signs of life. Adventurers who came to the northern wastelands all knew that if they had a conflict with the winter wolves, they had to be ruthless and kill them all. Otherwise, they had to be constantly on guard against the winter wolves' revenge. The winter wolves would always remember their hatred and let that hatred settle, accumulate, and grow in their hearts until the day they took revenge again. Once the wolf pack replenished their strength, they would go on an expedition again and take revenge for every member that had died. The life of the 5 winter wolves quickly drained away. Soon, the light in their eyes dimmed, and their life force dissipated completely. A wave of hurried footsteps hurried over. It was 2 teams of fully armed barbarians. "Sir, those 5 winter wolves are the murderers. Take care of them and skin them. Remember to be careful," Sulen said with a wave of his hand. "Send a team to search the surroundings and see if there are any that escaped." The winter wolf's fur was very precious. The barbarians' craftsmanship had long been masters of skinning. They easily skinned the entire winter wolf's fur intact. Seeing the complete winter wolf's fur, Sulen was amazed at the beauty of the winter wolf's fur. The ice blue fur was very soft. This kind of high-quality fur was not only used to make magic equipment, but it was also bought by noble ladies who loved beauty to make cloaks. 5 winter wolf's fur could be sold for at least 10,000 kinnar, but Sulen did not plan to sell it. Such beautiful fur was warm in the winter and cool in the summer. He planned to find a few high-level tailors to make cloaks for Chris and Hathaway as gifts. "Sir, a pack of ferocious wolves has been discovered in the forest," a drow hurriedly reported at this time. "Send someone to eliminate them directly." Sulen did not care. These ferocious wolves should have been summoned by the winter wolf, but they were obviously not used. A team of barbarians hurried over with a team of spearmen and longbowmen. When dawn came, all the ferocious wolves were either killed or escaped. Then, there was a batch of wolf meat in Mirror Lake City as food reserves. Without the threat of the winter wolf, the progress of Mirror Lake City accelerated again. Even Sulen stopped fishing and cast mud to stone on all the foundations of the city walls. Finally, after 2 weeks, the city walls of Mirror Lake City were finally built. Sulen was relieved. These days, he had cast mud to stone close to the last time. If it were not for the mana recovery effect of the tungsten steel, his energy would have been drained. The city walls had a circumference of 4 kilometers, a square shape, and a height of 6 meters. Such a small city did not originate from the kingdom of Florence, but it was the second city in Sulen's territory. A lot of soil had to be excavated during the construction of the rammed earth city walls, so Sulen directly asked them to dig a moat outside the city walls. The moat was 10 meters wide and 3 meters deep. The 2 ends were connected to Mirror Lake next to it. City wall, Mirror Lake City rammed earth city wall, height 6, 12 meters, length 4, 0.2 kilometers. The establishment of the city wall symbolizes that the city has defense and that the land has officially entered the era of civilization from the barbaric era. City defense +10, popular sentiment +8, civilization +3, stability +5, rammed earth city wall defense against water attacks -15, with a city wall, the people have a sense of security. Moat, Mirror Lake City width 10 meters, depth 3, 21 meters, length 4, 8 kilometers. The construction of the moat increases the difficulty of the enemy's attack. At the same time, it promotes water transportation. Defense against water attacks +10, city defense +8, popular sentiment +3, prosperity +3, transportation +2. The construction of the moat and the city wall gave Mirror Lake City a certain level of defense. A new city, Mirror Lake City, under construction, appeared on Sullen's system panel. After the construction of the city wall was completed, Sulen immediately built a warehouse in the city and transported all kinds of resources to the warehouse for storage. Then, all the slaves and workers were moved to the city to live. Because of the city wall, the safety was guaranteed. Sulen first arranged for the craftsmen to build houses. Because of the lack of time, the conditions of the houses were simple. They were just large bungalows, and each room could accommodate dozens of people. The construction of such rooms was fast, and a dozen of them were built in 1 or 2 days. Then, he let the workers and refugees live in them. As for the slaves, he built some fences. It was almost summer, and the temperature was comfortable. Even if the kobolds and goblins were outdoors, they would be fine. After the construction of the city wall was completed, he needed to build the residences, city lord's mansion, barracks, shops, port, and other buildings. After the construction of North Town City, he had trained a large number of skilled workers. These buildings could be built slowly. Sulen handed the safety of Mirror Lake City to Aiden. The 500 North Town City soldiers were all left here. Sir. Just as Sulen was giving Aiden the task, a guard hurried over with a bad expression. What's wrong? Sulen raised an eyebrow. Is there an enemy? No, there's a problem with the workers' dormitory that was built 2 days ago, the guard said hesitantly. What's wrong with the workers' dormitory? You should go take a look yourself, the guard said evasively. Sulen nodded and followed the guard to the workers' dormitory. Soon, the group arrived at the workers' dormitory. There were already soldiers standing guard outside. Sulen passed through the blockade and walked into the room. He immediately saw a dozen muscular men hugging each other. Some of them were even half naked, ready to fight. It was a very uncomfortable scene. Sulen felt the hairs on his back stand. His butt tightened. Separate them and lock them up, Sulen said with a dark face. A group of soldiers rushed in and dragged these people out. Sulen looked around the room in shock. Workers' dormitory, comfort +8, stamina recovery +10, broken back affection +22, mutual affection +20. Chapter 212. Brokeback love? Mutual affection? What kind of attribute was that? Like hell I'll be happy with you. Sulen was speechless. He hurriedly left the house. Tear down this workers' dormitory, Sulen said with an ugly expression. If this house was left for a while longer, all the workers inside would become gay. By then, Mirror Lake City would have to change its name. A team of craftsmen immediately came forward with all kinds of tools and began to tear down the house. This kind of house was simple to build and easy to tear down. After a series of clanking and clanking, the house quickly became a pile of ruins. Burn all the wood and dump the soil. Then, build a new workers' dormitory, Sulen ordered. While they were rebuilding, Sulen went to check the attributes of the remaining workers' dormitory. The result was good. There were no weird attributes like brokeback love or mutual affection. The new workers' dormitory didn't change much. It was still a large bunk, but this time, there were no weird attributes. Workers' dormitory, comfort +9, stamina recovery +10, cleanliness +5. After confirming that all the buildings were normal, Su Len continued to arrange things in Mirror Lake City. The military was left to Aiden. In terms of city construction, Su Len picked a good basic officer, Hanferson. He was in the first batch of graduates of the Northern Town Basic School. He was also one of the most hard-working students. His grades were very good. A few scholars liked him very much. Name, Hanferson. Loyalty, 90. Profession, Basic Officer, Beginner Scholar. Strength, 8 Agility, 7 Spirit, 7 Constitution, 8 Charm, 8 Command, 45 Characteristics, Talent. Strict Discipline, Serious, Smart, Management, Learning, Observation Skills, Quick Record, Northern Town Law, Basic Sword Skills, Deception, Proficient in Arithmetic. Specialization, Beginner Scholar. Weapon Proficiency, Sword Skills 56, Horsemanship 47, Bow 61. Su Len let Hanferson take charge of the construction work in Mirror Lake City. After arranging the affairs in Mirror Lake City, Su Luen returned to the North Town City. In more than a month, the North Town City had become more prosperous and lively. There were still a lot of construction sites in the city, and the construction of residential markets and commercial districts had not been completed yet. However, the Central Avenue of the North Town City, Rising Sun Avenue, and the Triumphal Arch were still under construction. The construction of the Arc de Triomphe had never stopped. Now, a large amount of white marble was piled up in the area. More than 1,000 slaves and craftsmen were working on it. In a month, the foundation of the Arc de Triomphe had been completed. However, it would take at least a few months to complete the construction. After returning to North Town City, Su Len went to soak in the hot spring first. He had been in Mirror Lake City for more than a month. Although he had gone to the lake to take a bath, the wilderness was not as comfortable as home. Angela and Anna were wearing thin clothes. The half-elves were tall and slender, and their waists were thin like willows. The curves of their backs were round, and their waists were slender. The thin clothes on their bodies were faintly discernible, revealing their white jade-like arms and legs. Even their delicate features were somewhat similar. They looked like a pair of twin flowers. After soaking in Sullen's water, they looked even more charming. At this moment, the two were helping him massage his body. The thin clothes on his body were quickly soaked by the hot spring. Su Len lay comfortably in the pool and enjoyed the service of the two. After a night of life and death battle, War God, Plasma Cannon, Su Len walked out of his room feeling refreshed. The morning air was already a little warm. The smell of summer had already spread across the northern wilderness. The construction of North Town City had already begun. As soon as the sun rose, the workers in the city began to organize the refugees and slaves to carry all kinds of tools to the construction site or reclaim the wasteland. North Town City had the harvest altar, so the land around the territory had been enhanced. Therefore, the food production had always been good. Many of the refugees and slaves who were farming were envious. They didn't even dare to think about such good land in the past. Now, as long as they worked for 5 years and accumulated enough work points, they would be able to exchange for a piece of land that belonged to them at the city hall. Seeing the city getting busy, Su Len also felt a sense of accomplishment. In less than a year, he had built a city from nothing in the wilderness. Su Len had a simple breakfast and then went to the Arc de Triomphe. The marble used in this wonder of a building needed to be fused with stone to mud. The Arc de Triomphe was made of large pieces of marble. After being transported back from the Sierra de Lotus, they were polished by stonemasons and then carved by master sculptors. These carved pieces of marble would be marked and placed according to the marked numbers. The Arc de Triomphe had 8 large reliefs. There were also statues of all kinds of flowers, birds, angels, and monsters. All of the master sculptors in North Town City were gathered here. Su Lan even spent money to hire some master sculptors from the northern provinces. The Arc de Triomphe wasn't just a simple arch. The Arc de Triomphe on the blueprint had a hall, staircase, and exhibition room. This place would display the contributions and sacrifices of Northtown City in previous wars. At the same time, the Battle Spirit Stone was also placed in this exhibition room. As a matter of fact, the Arc de Triomphe and the Martyr's Palace on the blueprint of the wonder of a building that Su Lan had obtained. However, Su Lan didn't have the blueprint of the Martyr's Palace. The two buildings complemented each other. After fusing all the marble pieces of the Arc de Triomphe, Su Lan left the place. Although Northtown City's infrastructure was more than half complete, there were still many places that needed upgrading. For example, the barracks and the training ground. In order to ensure Northtown City's prosperity, they had to have enough military force to protect themselves. Otherwise, everything before them would be nothing but an illusion. After a few expansions, the barracks in Northtown City were no longer enough. Now that the city had been upgraded, the barracks could be upgraded as well. Upgrading the barracks wasn't too difficult. Su Lan gathered 100 blacksmiths and 500 slaves and started upgrading them. The barracks, toilets, armory, and bathrooms in the barracks were all upgraded. A lot of training equipment was added to the training ground next to the barracks. Su Lan even built some of the training equipment he used in his past life, such as the balance beam, uneven bars, parallel bars, horizontal ladders, obstacle training ground, spear training ground, shooting range, and a training ground. Boss, what are these things? Are they useful? Standing next to Su Lan, Boulder looked at the balance beam, parallel bars and obstacle training in front of him and asked with some doubts. He knew that those stone locks and horizontal bars were used to train strength, but what were these things for? Su Lan said proudly, "These are good stuff. The balance beam can train a soldier's sense of balance. The obstacle training can help them pass through obstacles quickly. The horizontal ladders are, how can these simple things be so useful?" The others beside him didn't believe it either. The results of modern scientific training over a few decades were no joke. Su Lan glanced at them and didn't say anything else. What was the point of talking about it? They would know once they experienced it themselves. Training ground, difficulty enhancement +20, proficiency +13, limit break +5, training effect +16, training addiction +15. The newly upgraded training ground was much better than the previous one, and the various attribute enhancement effects were also very strong. What surprised Su Lan even more was that there was a limit-breaking effect. What was the effect of this effect? Could it help soldiers break through their limits and become heroes? If that was the case, Su Lan was going to make a fortune. If you want to know how effective it is, why don't you give it a try? Su Lan said to them. Sure, Johnson nodded and led some soldiers into the training ground. The food supply for the soldiers in Northern Town City was abundant. Even the new recruits looked like healthy young men, let alone the veterans. The amount of food and meat consumed in the barracks was a lot higher than anywhere else in Northern Town City. Not all the soldiers in this world were as rich as Northern Battlefront City. The soldiers in the northern provinces were lucky if they could get 2 meals a day. Most of the time, apart from the personal guards, the rest of the soldiers were recruited at the last minute. They would enter the battlefield after some simple training. Only the elite soldiers would get 3 meals a day. Even so, they would only get some meat every few days. The soldiers in Northern Battlefront City had meat every day. Only the personal guards of nobles were treated like that. Most of the soldiers in the city were farmers. They usually farmed and were given a spear when needed. In other words, they were cannon fodder. Every soldier in Northern Battlefront City was an elite. According to the game, they were elites. The generals were like mini-bosses. In the training ground, after Su Lan explained the usage of various equipment, the soldiers began to train. The loud slogans sounded. Su Luan asked someone to bring a reclining chair, and then lay leisurely in the shade of a tree to watch the soldiers train. The soldiers soon realized that the seemingly simple training was not as simple as it seemed. They could feel the pressure when they entered the training ground. It felt like their bodies had become a lot heavier. They followed the steps of the training. The soldiers soon fell in love with the training method. They continued to train tirelessly. It didn't take long before the ordinary soldiers couldn't take it anymore. They were all exhausted, but even so, these people still wanted to continue training. Su Len realized something was wrong when he saw the situation. He asked them to stop. "Boss, why did you ask us to stop? We haven't finished our training yet," Johnson said excitedly. "Look at those soldiers. Do you think they can still be trained?" Su Len glared at him. He mumbled to himself, "Is training addiction really that effective?" Chapter 213. What's going on? Johnson looked at the other soldiers in shock. Other than the barbarians who were still standing beside him, the other human soldiers were all lying on the ground, soaking wet as if they had just been fished out of the water. They were gasping for air. Sheriff Harrison's eyes widened, and he said, "Are the new recruits now so smart?" He and Aiton had been the new recruits' instructors, and these new recruits were trained by him in the beginning. When they first joined, they were the kind of guys who had to be beaten, scolded, and whipped to train obediently. If he wasn't careful, they would slack off. Why did they all change and work so hard today? Could it be because of the Lord? Good, you shameless bastards. You haven't even finished the new recruit training, and you've already learned how to suck up to the Lord. Harrison's eyes scanned back and forth. If he was half as smart as these soldiers, he wouldn't have been kicked out of the Silver Eagle Legion. It seemed that he had to learn from them in the future to suck up to the Lord and get himself a noble title. Arrange for someone to remind them during training in the future so that they don't get hurt, Su Len said with a guilty conscience. Get someone to carry them to the barracks. Su Len had already seen the barracks in the army after they were built. They had a few attributes such as recovery of stamina, cleanliness, and sleeping peacefully. There were no weird attributes such as surging homosexual feelings. Training addiction alone might cause those soldiers to get hurt, but with the barracks attributes, the two complemented each other perfectly. In the future, he wouldn't have to worry about the soldiers slacking off during training. A group of exhausted soldiers fell asleep quickly after being carried to the barracks. When they woke up, they were more or less recovered. After upgrading the barracks and the training ground, Su Len planned to upgrade his training ground as well. His training ground was specifically for training the dodging talent. After such a long time of training, he had mastered a roll dodging ability. As for the other dodging abilities, he only had some ideas. If he wanted to master them, he would have to continue training for a long time. Su Len brought the craftsman to his training ground and began to upgrade it. The structure of this training ground was complex, so upgrading it was a bit slow. It would take at least 2 days to complete the upgrade. Su Len left after looking at it for a while. He didn't plan to wait here forever. When Su Len left, the population of northern Battlefront City had already exceeded 15,000 people. Later, 3,000 people were moved to Mirror Lake City. However, after the caravan manager, Jean, spent a lot of money to recruit people, the population of northern Battlefront City did not decrease. Instead, it increased quite a bit. Now, the small feudal lords in the northern provinces had already regarded Xian as the god of fortune. After all, in the eyes of those feudal lords, sending away the refugees who were affecting the stability and harmony of their territories could make a lot of money while they were at it. Why not? During this period of time, the population of northern Battlefront City had already reached 17,000 people. The streets of northern Battlefront City were being built as fast as possible. It could be said that in the entire northern Battlefront City, other than Su Len, no one was idle. Even those who violated the city's sanitation regulations would not be thrown into jail. Instead, they would be chained up and forced to work. The housing problem of the refugees was very easy to solve. If it really didn't work, they would first build some shared dormitories. The men and women would be managed separately. Food was also quite abundant in northern Battlefront City. With housing and food to eat, the refugees would quickly settle down. After settling down, the refugees would be assigned to various construction sites to work. Right now, northern Battlefront City lacked basic-level officials. Although basic-level officials didn't have high positions, they still had to carry out many policies in northern Battlefront City. They still had a lot of power, so it was inevitable that some of them would abuse their power and accept bribes. Some of the basic-level officials had too little professional knowledge, so they could only make do with it. Although northern Battlefront City had a basic academy to train officials, it still took some time to train a basic-level official. There were just too many illiterates in this era. The growth of the basic-level officials couldn't keep up with the growth of the population. It was very difficult to supervise the basic-level officials. In ancient China, there was a saying that the royal power was not allowed in the countryside. It meant that the power of the dynasty could only reach the county level. The basic-level officials were all local gentry, clans, and elders. There were still many remnants of this situation even in modern times. Su Len grew up in the countryside in his previous life. He had seen the basic-level officials. To put it bluntly, 2,000 years ago in the countryside, basic-level officials were almost the same as the underworld. Later on, when information technology became more advanced and the supervision became stricter, things slowly improved. Su Len couldn't do anything about this for now. It was useless to build more schools if there weren't enough teachers. However, Su Len still had a lot of ways to deal with abuse of power, corruption, and accepting bribes. He built a prison in the past. It was quite effective, but he didn't use it on the basic-level officials. However, after this kind of illegal behavior happened again, he planned to make visiting the prison as the first stop for the officials. In order to enhance the effect, Su Len also planned to upgrade the prison. Although the prison in the past was effective, wouldn't it be better to enhance the effect? Since he had already thought of it, he would do it. Early the next morning, Su Len put down Chris and Hathaway who were wrapped around his body. He walked past Angela and Annie who were sleeping soundly beside him and swung a pendulum to the bathroom at the side to wash up. After a simple breakfast, Su Len found a group of craftsmen to bring him to the prison. There weren't many people in the prison in northern Battlefront City at the moment. Most of them had been brought out to do voluntary labor. The prison wouldn't keep idle people. Not only did you have to earn money to pay for your meals, you also had to pay for your room in the prison. When they arrived at the prison, the warden appointed by Su Len, Abeo, quickly greeted them. "How many prisoners are there in the prison?" Su Len asked directly. "Sir, there are 53 people in the prison. There are 11 serious criminals and 42 light criminals," Abeo said respectfully. "What kind of crimes did the serious criminals commit?" "Robbery, murder, and violent resistance." "Send them to the mines to work for 20 years. If they survive, let them go." Su Len directly decided the future of those people. "Send the rest of the light criminals to the construction site to work. During this period, I will upgrade the prison. The prison staff will guard the criminals and empty the prison." "Yes, sir." Abeo nodded and immediately asked the prison guards to bring all the prisoners out. After everyone left, Su Len began to upgrade the prison. Su Len combined the myths of his previous life with some legends about the river Styx, the god of death, and the abyss in this world. He began to add some elements to the prison. For example, the main gate of the prison was built like the gates of hell. All kinds of legendary monsters were carved inside the prison. They looked ferocious and terrifying. At the same time, the corridor leading to the prison was specially painted with scenes of the god of death judging souls. The innocent could continue to live in the city of the dead, but the guilty would be sent to various places to be tortured. The style of the prison was dark and gloomy. Su Len also showed the various kinds of torture in his previous life in pictures. Skinning, dismembering, cutting at the waist, and so on were all routine operations. There were also hot chains, deep fryers, mountains of knives and seas of fire, iron brushes, and so on. Each one looked more horrifying than the last. The artists hired by Su Len were terrified when they heard the descriptions, especially when they were in such a gloomy and depressing environment like the prison. At Sullen's request, the artists even drew the details of the torture as if they were alive. Statues of ferocious beasts were carved at regular intervals. At the same time, with the help of the light effect, these ferocious beasts looked ferocious and terrifying. The transformation of the entire prison took 5 days. When the prison was completed, it looked ferocious and terrifying just from the outside. It made people subconsciously want to escape. Excellent prison, this is an eerie and terrifying prison. Anyone who commits a crime will receive double the punishment here. Gloomy terror plus 32, extreme sturdiness plus 36, suppression plus 34, imprison criminals plus 32, repentance plus 33, reformation plus 35, psychological intimidation plus 33, city security plus 26, people's sentiment plus 20, prosperity minus 3. Su Len looked at the prison he had built under his guidance with satisfaction. Judging by the number of buffs, the prison was even stronger than Sullen's Castellan Palace. It was the highest level building in the northern citadel. "Is this a prison?" asked the workers who were staring at the prison with lingering fear. "Of course it's a prison. Do you want to experience it for yourself?" said Su Len to the workers with an evil grin. "No." The workers immediately shook their heads in rejection after hearing Sullen's words. Su Len ignored them. He waved at the guards beside him and said, "Bring the officials here in batches." "Yes, sir." The guard bowed respectfully and left in a hurry. After waiting for about 15 minutes, the guard brought a dozen or so officials to the prison gate. "My lord." The official saluted Su Len. "All right, get up. There's only one thing I called you here today. All the officials in the northern citadel have to go through an ideological education course. Only by passing this course can you continue to be an official in the northern citadel," said Su Len as he walked up to them. "Ideological education course?" Everyone looked at each other. "Yes, ideological education course." Su Len nodded. He pointed at the prison and said, "The course is simple. Come with me and the guards to visit the prison later. It won't take long." Su Len glanced at everyone calmly and said, "Let's begin." Then, a guard led Su Len and the officials into the prison. Chapter 214. Su Len led a dozen officials into the prison. As soon as they entered, the light dimmed instantly. The surroundings quieted down involuntarily. A gust of chilly wind blew through the passageway, causing the officials to shiver involuntarily. Although it was daytime, the passageway was still very cold. The lights on the walls were also somewhat dim. Under the dim light, the lifelike murals on the walls gave people a sense of immersion. The ferocious beasts and evil spirits on the murals seemed to jump out at any moment. The screams and wails of the people on the murals seemed to be right next to their ears. The various tortures made people tremble in fear. Su Len was very satisfied with the expressions of these people. This prison was only ineffective against the prison guards and wardens. However, once they violated the prison system, they would be treated the same way. The dim passageway was very long. Due to the lack of light, it gave people the feeling that this path was endless and led to the Styx River or the land of death. The ferocious sculptures that appeared a short distance away sent chills down one's spine under the dim light. All the shameful things that one had done in the past, or things that violated the law and morals, would appear in one's mind once again and begin to magnify. Then, one would involuntarily compare the consequences of the things that one had done to the painting on the wall just now. Many people revealed fear and paleness as they walked. It was not easy for them to walk through the passageway of the prison. When they reached the inside, there were all kinds of torture instruments. The environment of the prison made their hearts, which had just relaxed, tense again. Many people cried bitterly. Some even knelt down and complained about their mistakes while crying bitterly and begging for punishment. When everyone came out of the prison and saw the bright sunlight again, they suddenly felt like they had seen the light of day again. Su Lin opened the attributes of these people to check. Soon, he found that these people had an additional talent of fairness and integrity. Looking at these people's pale faces and sweating profusely, Su Lin was secretly pleased. Next, Su Lin had a cordial conversation with these officials. He encouraged them and highly praised their work. Then, he asked them to put down their ideological burdens and go back to work. After training this group of officials, Su Lin continued to send people to bring the other officials here in batches. Then, he asked the prison guards to take this group of people on a tour of the prison. Soon, the same scene appeared again 10 minutes later. Su Lin skillfully encouraged this group of frightened officials and asked them to go back to work again. Following this pattern, after spending a day, all the grassroots officials had toured the prison. Then, this ideological education course was also promoted to the middle-level officials. The effect was still remarkable. From today onwards, there was a new rule in the northern city. All officials had to come to the prison for ideological education before they officially took up their jobs. Only after ideological education could they start work. After a period of ideological education in prison, the officials of Northern Battlefront City instantly became honest and just. All kinds of abuse of power, corruption, and bribery in the past all disappeared. The operation of the entire city became smoother. The data showed that the prosperity of the city and the progress of the construction had improved. Just as the officials of the northern city were receiving ideological education, Sullen's training ground was also upgraded. The upgraded training ground didn't seem to have changed much. Some tools were added, but the attributes had changed a lot. Training ground, dodge training enhancement plus 28, difficulty increase plus 25, strength suppression plus 24, reflex training plus 25, training bonus plus 22, durability plus 25, smooth operation plus 26. Seeing the upgraded training ground, Su Lin was eager to try it out. After quickly installing the machine, Su Lin began to train. The most obvious feeling was that after the training ground was opened, Su Lin immediately felt an invisible force surrounding his body. This force restrained his strength. Then, the difficulty of the training also skyrocketed. The training that Su Lin could handle easily became difficult again. In the end, he finished today's training in a sorry state. However, the training effect was very good. The experience points gained were twice as much as before. With the improvement of the training effect, Su Lin felt that it wouldn't take long for him to master a new dodge ability. After the northern city's army was reorganized for a while, Su Lin began to prepare for the next step of expansion. This time, he set his sights on the Duergar in the underground world. The Grey Dwarves were the cousins of the dwarves. They were also good at mining and smithing, and they were quite strong, too. The dwarven warriors were quite famous. If they could recruit the Grey Dwarves, North Town's weapon-smithing standards and military strength would improve once again. However, it wasn't easy to enslave the Duergar. Su Lin planned to take the drows, centaurs, and barbarians with him. As for the humans, they weren't suitable to fight in the underground world. Su Lin brought Hathaway, Karina, and 1,000 soldiers to the entrance of the northern city's mine that led to the underground world. After opening the steel door, the group quietly entered the passage to the underground world. This time, Su Lin planned to sneak up on the Duergar. He took out the sky lantern and cast group invisibility. Then, the northern city's army disappeared into the passage. In order to deal with the environment of the underground world, Su Len chose the warriors with dark vision. The drows had the strongest dark vision, with 120 feet of dark vision. As for the barbarians and centaurs, they had 30 feet of dark vision. However, this dark vision was enough. After all, the Underdark wasn't completely dark. A large number of fluorescent plants provided dim light. The dark passage didn't cause too much trouble for the army. After the drows arrived, they were like fish in water. Some of the underground salamanders in the passage were killed as soon as they appeared. In the face of the army, these monsters couldn't resist at all. Because they had been through this passage before, the army moved forward quickly. After about half an hour, the army walked out of the narrow passage. "It's so beautiful here," Hathaway said with an infatuated expression as she looked at the fluorescent spores floating back and forth in the air. Indeed, the fluorescent plants unique to the underground world made the originally dark world brilliant. The Underdark represented the entire underground world. It could be a single huge space, or it could be an underground cavern connected by countless tunnels. According to the planetary void theory, most worlds had an underground world. Su Len wasn't interested in the formation of the underground world. He was interested in the rich mineral resources and slaves of the underground world. Wow, this is shadow grass. This is ghost face mushroom. This is dark night flower. After coming to the underground world, Hathaway quickly found a lot of magical plants. These magical plants were the specialty of the Underdark. They were all precious potion materials. Hathaway excitedly took out her tools and prepared to collect them. "Don't rush." Su Len grabbed Hathaway, who was eager to try. Then, under her puzzled gaze, he pointed to the shadows behind the plants. With the fluorescent spores floating in the air, Hathaway finally saw the monster hiding in the shadows. An underground serpent was lurking in the dark corner. This kind of underground serpent liked to hide in the dark and launch sneak attacks. They had a big mouth full of sharp teeth, looking ferocious and terrifying. Once they bit their target, they wouldn't let go easily. They were very dangerous hunters in the underground world. However, since the underground serpent was discovered, it was easy to deal with. Su Len took out a javelin and threw it. The javelin's powerful force made it so fast that the underground serpent didn't even have time to react. The javelin pierced through its head. After killing the underground serpent, Hathaway collected the magical plants. The army then continued to advance along the tunnel. This time, Su Len didn't go to the kobold tribe. Instead, he went directly to the giant void where the Grey Dwarf city was. With the presence of the drows, the army of Northtown City didn't encounter any difficulties. Some hook horrors, underground salamanders, and underground serpents living in the underground world were quickly eliminated. Soon, Su Len led the army to the Grey Dwarf city. With the effect of invisibility, Su Len didn't have to worry about being discovered by the Grey Dwarves. The fluorescent moss at the top of the void gave a faint light to the underground world. The Grey Dwarf city could be seen clearly in the distance. Due to the dangerous environment of the underground world, there weren't many field soldiers outside the Grey Dwarf city. It was a far cry from Northtown City's tens of thousands of acres. They were more used to building their land inside the city. This way, even if a battle broke out, the fields wouldn't be destroyed by the enemy. Su Len nodded to Hathaway. Hathaway took out her staff and began to cast a spell. Because she had to suppress the magic waves to the minimum, Hathaway's casting speed wasn't fast. The spell, which could be cast almost instantly, took almost a minute. Warlock's Eye. 5 translucent eyeballs appeared in the air. With a gentle wave of his hand, the Warlock's Eye flew towards the Grey Dwarf city. The Warlock's Eye didn't get too close to avoid being discovered. Although the underground world didn't have a clear division of day and night like the surface world, they still had time devices. The fluorescent moss also changed its brightness with the time. It was still daytime in the underground world. Sulan had enough patience to wait for the grey dwarves to rest. About 2 hours later, the city of the Duergar began to quiet down, and the fluorescent moss on the dome began to dim. Some of the grey dwarves who were working outside the city also returned to the city. Sulan planned to launch a sneak attack at midnight, so the soldiers of Northtown City took the time to rest, except for a few scouts. Hathaway, on the other hand, controlled the Warlock's Eye to keep an eye on the Grey Dwarf City. Time passed quickly. Sulan took out the magic clock made by Hathaway and looked at the time. He waved his hand, and the army of Northtown City silently advanced towards the Grey Dwarf City. Chapter 2:15. Wizard eyes had been monitoring the movements of the Grey Dwarf City from high up in the sky. The army of Northtown City slowly but surely advanced toward the city with the help of group invisibility. The land outside the city was flat. Many places were planted with edible fungi, which were the main source of food in the underworld. An underground river ran through the city. The army of Northtown City advanced cautiously. With 1,000 people moving together, even with the invisibility spell, they could still be discovered if they were careless. After all, they were only invisibility spells. Their scents and footprints would still be left behind unless they used spells to erase their tracks. The sound of the flowing river covered the sound of Sullen's army advancing. After more than an hour, Sulan led the army of Northtown City to the edge of the Grey Dwarf City. The Grey Dwarf City was originally carved out of a rock wall. After some repairs, it was built with a large amount of rock. It was unusually sturdy. If they wanted to take down the city using normal methods, they would need to have more than 10 times the number of soldiers and pay a heavy price. However, it was not impossible for Sulan to take down the city. The walls of the Grey Dwarf City might be tall, but it was not much different from a peaceful place for Sulan. A few Grey Dwarf soldiers were dozing off on the walls. Sulan pressed his hand against a rock. He was about to use stone to mud to break a big hole in the wall. "Wait," Hathaway suddenly said, grabbing Sullen's hand. "Is there a problem?" Sulan asked. Hathaway nodded. She stepped forward and touched the wall for a while. This wall was built with obsidian. It was also carved with elemental runic matrices. The entire wall is connected. Hathaway frowned. Because of the elemental runic matrices, it's very difficult to use stone to mud to break a hole in the wall. Also, the runic matrices will immediately send a message if you cast a spell on the wall. "Looks like it's not possible to enter this place quietly," Sulan muttered. He then waved at Karina and said, "There are a few Grey Dwarf guards inside. Let's attack them together and then open the gate." After that, the three of them had a simple discussion, and with the help of Fly, they successfully flew up the city wall. Since the Grey Dwarves were not at war during this period, their defense was very lax. There were only 2 sentries on the city wall who were drinking and slacking off in the lee of the wind, and a few other sentries were hiding in the houses nearby. Stun. 2 Hathaway snapped her fingers, and 2 beams of light flashed. The 2 Durgars hiding in the leeward corner didn't even have time to groan before their eyes rolled back and fell to the ground. Sulan hurriedly reached out to support them, then gently leaned them against the wall and waved at them. Karina and Hathaway then attacked the remaining Durgars in the small room. Stun. Controlling humanoid creatures. Several beams of light flashed, and the sentries who were resting in the room either fainted or were controlled by the spells. Sulan walked into the room, and it was filled with the stench of sweat and alcohol. For Durgars who loved to drink, they would drink a few glasses even if they were on duty. Other than some leftover food, there were also plenty of bottles of alcohol in the room. Sulan casually searched through the Durgars for the key to open the gate. Soon, he found a cloth pouch on one of the Durgars. There was a key, 2 rubies, and a book in the pouch. Sulen flipped through the book and saw that it was a diary. Durgars have a habit of keeping diaries? Sulen casually flipped through the pages. Most of the diary was about the daily life of a Durgar soldier, but the diary still revealed some information. For example, there were about 1,000 Durgars in this city. Sulen also found out who the Durgars' king was from the diary. He also found something even better. King Thorn is too stingy. We dug up a fist-sized ruby from the ground, and he only gave me 20 gold coins and 10 barrels of wine as a reward. He's far worse than his father, Solis. If I'd known, I wouldn't have supported him to become king. It seems that our Durgar's king isn't loved by their people. Sulen shrugged and put the diary back. Karina, let him use the key to open the gate. As you wish, my lord, Karina replied. She snapped her fingers, and the Durgars she had controlled with the humanoid creature control spell walked over with a dull look in their eyes. They picked up the key and walked down the tower. With the key, the gate of the Durgar's city was easily opened. Such a big movement must have alarmed a lot of people, but it didn't matter now. Su Luan's army had already entered the city. How could the flying dragon riders lose when they pushed the tower to the high ground? The barbarians and drows were the first to enter the city. Half of the centaurs were left outside, and the rest followed in. The large army's movement immediately woke up even more Durgars. Many of them didn't even have time to put on their armor before coming out with their weapons. Sulen took the lead on a tall black-maned horse. It had to be said that the Durgar's city was very majestic. The city's streets were 10 meters long and were all paved with a layer of stone. In the center of the city stood a majestic building. It was the royal palace of the Durgars. The building was at least 20 meters tall, and there was a bright magic lamp at the top. Although the whole palace didn't have many luxurious decorations, it was magnificent and dignified. Next to the palace was a shrine, where the deities of the Grey Dwarves were worshipped. The straight and wide streets, neat and tidy stone houses, and simple and practical stone stairs, were filled with the architectural style of the Grey Dwarves. Before entering the city, Sulen had already checked the layout of the Durgar's city with the wizard's eye. The drows leading the team also knew the layout, so they immediately carried out the plan. Some of them were led by Sulen to attack the palace and the shrine. The rest of the northern city's army took the intersections of the streets and separated the Durgars, killing or capturing them bit by bit. According to Sulen's plan, the Durgars were completely different from the gnolls, bugbears, and orcs. Those gnolls and orcs could only work as laborers or be sold to the arena for money, but the Durgars were different. They had exquisite forging skills and were also mining masters. Their fighting skills were also quite good. They were much more valuable than the gnolls and orcs, so it was better to reduce the number of casualties. The Durgars weren't prepared for tonight's sneak attack at all, and many of them panicked when the city gate was taken. Facing the powerful races like barbarians, drows, and centaurs, the Durgars had no advantage at all. They were quickly defeated by the warriors of the northern city. They couldn't win, so they wanted to run, but they found that their short legs couldn't outrun the long legs of the barbarians and drows, not to mention the four-legged centaurs. Seeing that there was no hope of escape, they fought desperately and were beaten back. Many of the Durgars could only choose to surrender. These cunning and selfish Durgars didn't have the thought of facing death with equanimity. Sulen rode his black-maned horse and led the army to the palace. Hathaway and Karina followed closely behind. All the Durgars they encountered along the way were sent flying by Sulen's halberd and fainted. With Sulen's current legendary rank strength, no one was a match for him. Rushing all the way to the gate of the palace, Su Luan encountered some decent resistance. 50 dwarf defenders wearing heavy armor and holding axes and hammers had already formed a formation in front of the gate of the palace. Their leader was a dwarf in golden armor and a goat horn helmet. He was glaring angrily at Sulen with his axes. "Humans, you are now attacking Dwarf King Thorn's city. If you retreat now, I can pretend that nothing happened, the armored dwarf said loudly. I'm about to take down the entire city. I advise you to surrender now. I can guarantee your safety, Su Len chuckled. Don't even think about it. The people of Dougal are fearless. Is that so? Su Len didn't waste any more words. He waved his hand and said, attack. The barbarians and centaurs behind him threw their axes and javelins. At such a close distance, the javelins were powerful. Even if the dwarven armor was tough, it was still dented by the impact. Some unlucky ones were pierced by the javelins and had their heads blown off instantly. Although some weren't injured, they were knocked back 2 steps by the force of the javelins. The originally neat formation was instantly scattered. Su Len took the lead and rushed forward. The purple dragon halberd in his hand was surrounded by dazzling lightning. When he rushed to the front of the formation, the purple dragon halberd swept across. The 3 dwarven soldiers in the front row were directly sent flying. Their bodies were entangled by the power of lightning. Although the metal armor had good defense, it had almost no defense against the power of lightning. All the enemies lost their fighting strength when they were hit by Sullen's purple dragon halberd. Su Len was invincible in the formation. The leading dwarf roared and rushed forward with his axe. However, this dwarf was very cunning. He didn't attack Su Len. Instead, he swung his axe at the back of the black-maned horse. If he hit, even if the black-maned horse was a product of the system, it would be finished. At the critical moment, Su Len squeezed the horse's belly. The black-maned horse retreated and instantly kicked back. It just dodged the dwarf's attack and kicked him in the chest, sending him flying far away. Chapter 2:16. Just as Su Len was about to catch up and finish him off, a powerful wave of magic suddenly came. The air suddenly became a little cold, and snow-white ice crystals quickly appeared and began to spin. Ice storm. Counterspell. The ice storm that was forming was suddenly interrupted, and the ice crystals suddenly shattered. A grey dwarf dressed as a wizard hiding behind the dwarven army turned pale, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. This was because he was severely injured after his spell was interrupted. He had lost to Hathaway in a battle of will. Then, 5 fireballs flew out from behind and hit the grey dwarf wizard in an instant. An energy shield immediately lit up on the wizard's body, and under the continuous bombardment of 4 fireballs, the energy shield was directly shattered. Then, the last fireball directly hit his body. A ball of flame rose up, and the fireball spell that could melt steel exploded. The flames burned, and large chunks of flesh were directly burned into charcoal. Miserable screams of despair sounded like the cries of evil spirits from the abyss, accompanied by the smell of burnt fat that spread out. The energy in Sullen's body flowed, and the lightning on the purple dragon halberd suddenly skyrocketed. Without any hesitation, the dazzling lightning burst out from Sullen's body and enveloped all the grey dwarves in front of him. Thunder Prison. The strong lightning lit up the underground world, and a powerful electric current swept out in an instant. All the dwarves were surrounded by lightning, and their bodies were stiff and could not move. If Su Len had not controlled the power, these dwarves would have all been burned into charcoal. After a moment, the light disappeared, and all the dwarves were lying on the ground, unable to move. After dealing with these dwarves, Su Len did not stop and continued to walk to the palace. There was no one else in the palace, and Su Len found an open tunnel in one of the rooms. Without guessing, the rest of the people in the palace should have escaped from here. Letting the drows chase after the grey dwarves who escaped, Su Len constantly led people to attack the grey dwarves who were still resisting, and at the same time arranged for people to take over the city. With the last batch of resistance eliminated, the city of grey dwarves fell into Sullen's control. Su Len locked up all the Durgar in the prison and began to count the spoils of war. Congratulations, host. You have successfully breached the Duergar's city and defeated them. You have obtained a glorious victory, and your name will begin to spread throughout the underworld. Ambush of the Grey Dwarves, year 1687 of the Huiyue calendar. At the end of June, you led your army through an underground tunnel and ambushed the Grey Dwarf city. The Grey Dwarves were caught off guard by your sudden attack, and Northgard City's army easily obtained a glorious victory. Prestige +5, congratulations, host. You have conquered the Duergar city and defeated the Dwarven army. You have gained 31,200 EXP. Congratulations, host. You have conquered the Duergar city and defeated the Duergar. You have obtained 3 gold treasure chests and an item, Mount Sachet. Sulan began to check his spoils of war. 3 gold treasure chests and a Mount Sachet. They were far from what he had obtained in the last Orc War, but fortunately, he had conquered the Duergar city. Otherwise, he would have only obtained 1 gold treasure chest at most. After opening the 3 gold treasure chests, 3 rays of golden light flashed, and Sulan heard the system's voice ring in his ears. Congratulations, host. You have obtained a self-created hero template. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the skill, Reduce Enemies' Defense. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the innate skill, Lightning Reflex. Sulan was overjoyed when he saw the self-created hero template. He hadn't obtained this item in a long time, and he didn't think that he would actually obtain it this time. The self-created hero template could turn a normal person into a hero, greatly increasing their potential. It could also be used to force people to maintain absolute loyalty. The two uses didn't conflict. As long as the self-created hero template was combined, it represented a hero with legendary potential. It could be said that the value was very high. Sulan put away the self-created hero template and looked at the remaining 2 items. Reduce Enemies' Defense, Battle Spell, Group Effect. A spell that appeared after the system combined the rules of this world. After the spell is cast, it can reduce the enemy's defense by 10% through the power of a curse. Seeing the effect of this spell, Sulan chose to learn it directly. He had just used the skill points he had left behind last time. A light flashed, and a large amount of knowledge about Reduce Enemies' Defense appeared in Sulan's mind. This spell could be cast directly on the enemy's entire army as long as one's mental strength and strength could keep up. Of course, it would consume a lot of energy and mana. The last chest opened was a Lightning Reflex talent. Sulan already had a legendary battle reflex, and the effects of these 2 talents were similar. Of course, the legendary battle reflex was more powerful, but for talents, it was never a bad thing to have too many of them. Even if it was the most common evasion talent, if you could stack more than a dozen of them, it was estimated that it would really depend on luck if someone wanted to target you in a battle. Many legendary warriors carried more than a dozen talents, and some even had more. Because Sulan's advancement speed was fast, his talents were better than those veteran legendary powerhouses. Now that he had Lightning Reflex, he naturally wouldn't reject it. Lightning Reflex, your reaction speed has become very fast. Your reaction speed has increased by 10% among all reaction abilities. Originally, with the legendary battle reflex talent, Sulan's attack speed was very fast. Now that he had the lightning reflex talent, Sulan's attack speed had become even faster, and his evasion speed had also increased. It could be said that his overall reaction speed had been improved. Although this battle didn't escalate, Sulan's strength had increased by a lot. After sorting out his gains, Sulan began to count the benefits he had obtained from the Grey Dwarves. The Grey Dwarves had 712 captives, and the rest had died in the battle. These Grey Dwarven slaves were very popular in the human kingdoms, and it was normal for them to be sold for 100 or 200 gold coins. Those skilled blacksmiths were even more difficult to find. Sulan planned to send the skilled Grey Dwarves to the blacksmiths, and let the rest of them work in the mines. Of course, the Grey Dwarf strength was also not bad. Although they were quickly defeated by sullen sneak attack, if they were really arranged in a battle formation, although Northern Fortress City could win, they would have to pay a heavy price. The Grey Dwarven defenders were famous heavy infantry in the overworld. As for the Grey Dwarven knights, it was fine to just look at them. It was said that in the First Era, the Grey Dwarven Kingdom had formed a thunderous fury legion. More than 500 Grey Dwarves had the bloodline of the Grey Dwarven King, and they had the ability, God's Descent. It was the most powerful legion at that time, but such a powerful legion had long since disappeared in the long river of history. The Grey Dwarven Kingdom had long since fallen apart, becoming the Mountain Dwarves, Turan Dwarves, Iron-Forged Dwarves, and several other Grey Dwarven kingdoms. There weren't many Grey Dwarves with the ability, God's Descent, let alone the thunderous fury legion from ancient times. Apart from the 700 Grey Dwarven slaves, the greatest wealth in the city was the Grey Dwarves' accumulation. Sulen found a treasury in the Grey Dwarven Palace. The moment he opened it, he was almost blinded by the golden light. The entire Grey Dwarven Kingdom had accumulated hundreds of years of wealth, and the treasury in front of him was filled to the brim. It was like a mountain of gold. The Grey Dwarves loved to mine, and the underground world was very rich in minerals. If the dragons loved gold the most in this world, then the Grey Dwarves were the second. In order to excavate gold, the Dwarven Kingdom had once hollowed out an entire mountain and continued to dig deeper into the ground. In the end, they had even awakened the Balrog Overlord, who had been in a deep slumber since ancient times. As a result, the Balrog Overlord destroyed the Dwarven Kingdom. The Grey Dwarves were also Grey Dwarves, and these Grey Dwarves who loved to mine had accumulated an astonishing amount of gold. Apart from gold, Sulen also found a large number of gems in this treasury. There were rubies, topaz, sapphires, multicolored gems, and all kinds of gems piled up into a small mountain. There were at least several hundred pieces. Moreover, the gems in this treasury were all of high purity. Any one of these gems could be sold for thousands or even tens of thousands of kinnar. Apart from gold and gems, there were also a large number of rare metals in this treasury. Sulen even found some abyssal iron, adamantine, crimson fire copper, frost iron, and so on. He even found a small piece of mithril. These things directly made Sulen a huge fortune. Although he had not counted them, there were at least tens of millions of gold in this Grey Dwarven palace. This amount of gold was more than enough for him to build more cities. Of course, if such a large amount of gold was sold in such a short time, it would only cause an economic crisis in the northern provinces. Even if all the goods in the northern provinces were sold to Sulen, they would not be able to get so much gold. Sulen's current problem was that he had too much gold. What should he do? Of course, if Sulen knew some spells that consumed gold, the gold would be used up very quickly. For example, the Dragon's Covenant. He would sign a contract with an adult dragon and summon it into battle. After the contract was over, he would have to pay the dragon a reward. There was also the limited wish spell, which could be said to use gold to make wishes. Wizards always had a way to consume large amounts of gold. It was said that a legendary wizard would consume hundreds of tons of gold in his lifetime, or even more. After checking the treasury, Sulen went to the city's armory. There were a large number of dwarf-forged equipment stored here. There were hundreds of sets of armor and even more weapons. However, these armors were made according to the dwarves' body shape. If a human wanted to use them, they would have to undergo some modifications. Chapter 217. The city of the Grey Dwarves was called Orlander, which meant fertile land. The river that flowed through the city was called the Odonia River, and it was the largest river in the underworld. The land occupied by the Grey Dwarves was indeed a fertile land. Sulen also found a lot of food in the city's warehouse. Most of it was mushrooms and fungi, and some of it was probably a variant of potatoes. Although the land was not big, it could still feed 2,000 to 3,000 people. Sulen searched the whole city and began to escort the prisoners and gold away. The grey dwarves who escaped through the secret passage of the palace did not manage to escape in the end. Their 2 short legs could not outrun the 4 legs of the centaurs. After discovering that some of them had escaped, Sulen immediately sent people to hunt them down. With the cooperation of the drows who were good at hunting and the centaurs who were good at raiding, they were caught before they could escape from the underground cave. After a selection of the grey dwarves, there were 200 blacksmiths among them, and there were even a few blacksmith masters. This made Sulen overjoyed. There was not a single blacksmith master in the whole northern citadel, and this time, there were a few who came directly. However, there was a problem that gave Sulen a headache. Although the grey dwarves had surrendered, they were not willing to serve Sulen. Sulen asked the drows to train the grey dwarves, but even so, the results were not very good. The grey dwarves had the same stubborn personality as their dwarves. It was possible to make them do manual labor, but it was difficult to make them forge weapons for you. When the drows enslaved the grey dwarves, they would use the divine spells of the spider Queen Lolth to make the grey dwarves submit. The drows in the northern citadel believed in the Dark Maiden, and they did not have the ability to forcibly enslave other races. Sulen thought for a while and finally tried to build a prison camp in the northern citadel. The prison camp was not large, and there were not many facilities inside. In only 2 days, the prison camp was completed, and the completed prison camp did not disappoint. Prisoner camp, Unbreakable +18, Reformation +15, A Wise Man Submits to Circumstances +18, Disintegrate Willpower +16, Give Up Resistance +18, Prison Break -30, Clean and Healthy +15. The stubborn Durgars wouldn't be able to resist for long. After the construction of the prison camp was completed, Sulen directly sent all the Durgars to the prison camp to be modified. Although most of the dwarves were as stubborn as rocks, there were always a few exceptions. After 3 days of sending the prisoners of war, a few grey dwarves had already surrendered. After receiving the news, Sulen came here to see if they had really decided to give in. Arriving at the prisoner of war camp, as soon as he entered the door, he heard a burst of swearing. Barker, Kashi, you 2 cowards. You will be spurned by His Highness Durag. Even if you die, you will only fall into the bottomless abyss, traitor. I'm ashamed of being your neighbor. Traitor. Coward. You 2 cowards who are afraid of death. Behind the fence, many Durgars pointed at the 2 Durgars in the fence and scolded them. The 2 Durgars lowered their heads and remained silent, their faces red. Sulen didn't care about the noise of the grey dwarfs. Although they were shouting happily now, it wouldn't take long for them to give in. Have you made your decision? Sulen asked the 2 Durgars. Barker and Kashi looked at each other and nodded. My lord, we have decided. We are willing to serve you. A wise choice. Sulen nodded when he saw the names of the 2 Durgars in the system interface. Although their loyalty was only at 65, as long as they had surrendered, it would not take long for the remaining loyalty to rise. A wise man submits to circumstances. In order to reward you for surrendering to the light, I have prepared some rewards for you. Sulen said with a smile. He did not care about the 2 Durgars. Sulen turned to Chris and said, have someone send over a few bottles of vodka. Chris nodded and asked someone to prepare them. Vodka was the name Sulen gave to the alcoholic drink brewed with potatoes. Unlike the vodka of the Russians in his previous life, the vodka brewed in Northtown was not as alcoholic. Due to technical reasons, the vodka brewed in Northtown was only 30% alcoholic. Even so, a drink with 30% alcoholic content was very rare in this world. It was currently the most popular drink in the taverns of Northtown. The sales of rum had dropped by a lot. Soon, a guard came back with 2 bottles of vodka. Even the Durgars who were yelling stopped and stared at the 2 bottles of vodka. Puff! A soft sound rang out as the cork was opened. The rich aroma of alcohol instantly filled the air. The two Durgars closest to the bottles took a deep breath and their throats kept sliding down. Sulen noticed their situation and laughed inwardly. As expected, these Durgars could not resist the temptation of alcohol. Sulen handed the 2 bottles of vodka to Barker and Kathy. The 2 Durgars who had long been addicted to alcohol took a big gulp after receiving the bottles. Gulp, 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 gulp. The 2 Durgars couldn't wait to raise their heads and drink half a bottle. Then their faces turned red. The clear liquid flowed down their thick beards and the rich aroma of alcohol spread out. Gulp. The sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard. The Durgars in the enclosure looked at the bottles in the 2 Durgars' hands with longing, as if they would rush up and snatch them in the next second. Phew! Barker let out a deep breath after he recovered from the alcohol. He then said excitedly, "Sir, this is amazing. The Dwarven Fire wine is like water compared to this. This is definitely the best wine." "Yes, this wine is definitely the best. I love it," Kathy yelled from the side. "I'm glad you like it. Alright, since you've decided to serve the northern city, follow them to go through the formalities. You'll officially start work tomorrow," Sulen said as he pointed at an official beside him. "Yes, sir. We're at your service," the 2 Durgars said happily. At this time, Suluan also discovered that the loyalty of the 2 Durgars had risen from 65 to 80. He estimated that as long as they stayed in northern Battlefront City for a while, their loyalty would soon rise to 90. After sending the 2 Durgars away, Sulen came to the front of the enclosure and said to the Durgars, "Do you have anything to say? Damn human, we won't yield. Don't even think about making us work for you." "That's right, we won't yield." The Durgars yelled again. Their expressions were exactly the same as when King Zay, who would rather die than submit, pointed at the door and said, "Piss off." "Chris," Sulen waved his hand gently. The little succubus giggled and handed over a bottle of vodka. Sulen took the bottle. The Durgars who were still cursing suddenly felt like their fates were being strangled. Sulen opened the bottle and poured out a glass. The clear liquid had a strong aroma. The aroma was like a hook that attracted the Durgars' eyes. "Do you want some?" Sulen asked softly. The grey dwarves nodded involuntarily. "Sure, no problem. Buck and Casey are examples," Sulen said with a smile. Suluan said with a smile, and then put the glass of wine only half a meter away from them. At this distance, they could smell the strong fragrance of the wine, but they couldn't reach it. Looking at the grey dwarves who stretched out their arms to grab the glass, Suluan almost burst into laughter. "That's what you get for your stinky mouths. I'm going to make you die from hunger today. I won't let you drink a single drop." Sulen left in satisfaction when he saw the Durgars stretching their arms but still unable to reach the glass. Before he left, he specifically told the guards of the prison camp to ignore the Durgars even if they were willing to yield. He didn't want them to die from hunger. After putting the Durgars aside for the time being, Sulen began to transport the various treasures in Orlando to Northtown. The Durgars had accumulated a large amount of gold over the past few centuries. Sulen planned to use some of it as coins and put the rest into the Lord's treasury. At the same time, all the soldiers who participated in the attack on the Durgars' city would be rewarded. Sulen could take all the gold they obtained from the battle, but the soldiers would definitely be dissatisfied. In the end, Sulen asked Chris to come up with a reward system. All the soldiers who participated in the battle were rewarded between 30 and 100 kinnar. The large amount of rewards made the soldiers rich in an instant. At the same time, the soldiers who didn't participate in the battle were drooling with envy. The eyes of the refugees and slaves who didn't join the army were red with envy. Suddenly, a large number of people wanted to join the army. If Sulen agreed to expand the army, it would be easy to recruit 1,000 more people. The rewards made Sullen's reputation rise again. The loyalty of the soldiers who received the rewards also increased. Moreover, the morale of the army also increased. Now, the soldiers in the barracks were all eager to go out and fight at any time. Most of the soldiers who received the reward started to buy all kinds of goods in the market. Northtown's commerce was flourishing, and all kinds of goods were available. The inflow of money from the soldiers also made the market even more prosperous. Although the rewards for the soldiers cost more than 100,000 kinnar, the results were still very good. The morale of the soldiers was greatly boosted, and their enthusiasm to join the army also increased. The soldiers received a better life, and the city's market became more prosperous. It could be said that it was killing many birds with one stone. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.